So welcome everyone to the end of the month meetup for the Florida Game Developers Association. We're the official Unity3D and Magic Leap user group in South Florida. And we also help host the Unreal Engine user group here as well. So we have a very special meetup with some really cool guests today. We have Vilas, who is a Unity, Unreal, PlayStation developer. So he has a pretty cool presentation about how to basically create a game from concept to launch, and he's going to show some games he's actually done from that concept. I mean, from that timeline. And we're also going to talk about upcoming PlayStation 5 and even PSVR. What's going to happen in that space in the next few months when PlayStation 5 launches. We also have Aaron here from the Game Mentor Network, and he's going to be answering your questions about game development and also giving you feedback about your games. And as always, we're at the end of the meetup. We're going to show each other's games and get feedback from each other. And some of that won't be recorded because it's they're works in progress. But whoever's here in person will get to play each other's games and give feedback. So yeah, so take it away, Aaron.
Sorry, did you want?
I mean, I'm sorry, Vilas. actually, why don't you guys introduce yourself first? Aaron, since you're on the screen already, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. Thanks. My name's Aaron Vanek. I am probably the least qualified person to be in this meetup because my video game experience is very limited and it's from last century. I used to work as a designer for a video game company outside Chicago called Terraglyph.
Well, if you're going to say century, you might as well say millennium.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Or what's a 2000, right? There's probably another term, quartet.
Yeah, I don't remember what it is. So it was briefly, I was briefly in the video game industry in Chicago. Terraglyph was one company I worked for. Also, the original founding of the company that turned into Jambox, or what's the Jackbox, the one that has the streaming like trivia games. That was You Don't Know Jack, and then before that it was an educational company called Learn Television, and that's what I mainly do is educational games. I teach game design, but this is all analog games. I am all pen and paper person, but I teach, to kids, usually ages 8 to 16, role-playing game design, board game design, card game design. And all the way from soup to nuts in terms of research and brainstorming and publishing and all that stuff. But it's for kids. So I'm very interested in teaching games, but also using games for education. So right now I'm running a role-playing game over Roll20 for kids. Just had the first class yesterday. And I'm also on the board of directors of a nonprofit, the Game Academy, which is a 501c3 that uses role-playing games for education. So I'm very big on the educational aspect of gaming, either teaching games and game design or using games actually to educate people.
It's great. Yeah, we just did a Roll20 playtest like 2 weeks ago, so it was pretty interesting. Watch that. So yeah, if you want to give a demo on Roll20, that'd be fun. And there are a lot of people who are into tabletop gaming. We actually have a really popular, several really popular tabletop meetups here in South Florida, so we get a lot of crossover. So, and I think just the basics of role-playing tabletop games, it's actually a really good way to get into these type of other topics as well. So it's not either or. And
yeah,
we do have game design professors from University of Miami who do teach game design with just pen and paper for us. So
we one of the first things I teach all the kids, because they're obviously interested in video games, is that the concepts that I'm teaching of game design and the elements of game design apply to video games just as much. And if you look at video game design, a lot of times you'll start with a paper prototype also. So the concepts definitely apply.
It's great. So so you'll be the second speaker tonight. So let's I'll just let the audience introduce themselves, and then we'll get into Vilas, the keynote for today. So, Allison, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure.
And then Robert, you can introduce yourself second after.
So I'm Allison. I've actually primarily learned full stack web development, but part of the reason why I got more fascinated by programming and code was because of video games, since I play a lot of video games. So once I started delving into all these different, one of my first classes was a C++ class because I knew that it was very well connected to console games. But from there I had, struggled with work school relations. And I don't know, I eventually just found myself going to a boot camp because I wanted to get involved in the industry, the tech industry in some way that was a little faster than having to struggle with going to school for a bachelor's degree. So I did that. But along the way, I learned a great deal of coding skill and integration skill, and I would say more importantly, teaching myself how to do stuff skills was particularly helpful. So, but I wanted to start networking and meeting people in either field, web development or games. And one thing in particular I have done so far is make a HTML JavaScript game with the Phaser game engine. Pretty simple and basic, but the actual idea was to learn how to use a backend API in Ruby on Rails, and then attach that to a JavaScript front end. So that was actually the goal of my project, but I wanted to be fancy and incorporate games. So
that's great. That's one. Yeah, I know with Aaron will probably agree, or is, if you're passionate about something like gaming, you can learn. It'll help you learn other things as well. It's awesome. So cool. Yeah, we're gonna play your game later on to meet up. So, Robert, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Multitasking here. I'm a mobile developer for iOS and Android. I don't know if and when I'll.
Robert, can you speak up?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, or maybe just put the microphone closer to your.
How about now?
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead.
All right, I can reconnect if you want to go to the other folks. I'll come back to me.
Okay, that's fine. You can introduce yourself, I guess, at the after Vilas speaks. So Vilas, I'll hand it over to you now.
Sure. Yeah. So, well, thank you so much for the invite. My name is Vilas Tewari, and I'm a game developer. I've been doing game development for about 11 years now. And I've mostly been doing development for a lot of startups who want to use game technology to build virtual worlds or sort of game-like projects. And about 8 years ago, I decided to take a stab at doing an indie game. So I started a company called Condescent Games, and we basically develop our own games, and then we also do contract work for other studios that need programming or any kind of consultation on game engine tech. Yeah, and should I just go into my talk, or?
Yeah, or do you want to show your website and maybe some of the things that you've made? And then
I can do that at the end. Yeah, I can do that after.
Cool. Sure.
Probably. So I'll just start off here. So hopefully you can see my screen. I'm just loading up a few slides.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah, it's coming through okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so when Praveen asked me to talk, I figured one thing that could have been helpful when I was starting off and I didn't really know much about how game development works is to have a little bit of insight into what the whole process is. So starting from a prototype, how do you actually get to the next stage of like, okay, we've got a demo, or we've got an alpha, and how does that eventually lead to like we've launched on Steam or we've launched on console? This was something that my team, as we went along, we had to sort of learn and adapt, but I figured it'd be useful to just get a high-level overview of that process. So, I covered my background. Basically, I'm a programmer. I also do a little bit of 3D art, and I've been like super into game development since a young age. And Condescent Games, the company that built Tinertia, which is the project I'm going to cover, that was I founded that some years ago with a small team, and we're still doing indie games. So the topics I'll cover are some of the key decisions we made during development, a couple of things that we learned as we started to build out our game and approach Sony and Valve and try to get on their platforms, and Microsoft as well. Some actionable advice that I could give based on our experience. Like I said, our path to getting on these major platforms. And then I'll talk a little bit about specific details that are specific to Unity3D when you're trying to get something on a console. And then, yeah, we can do Q&A at the end, or, since it's a small group, if you have a question, just speak up and let me know. I'll just acknowledge the team here. So it was not just me. There was a large team that worked on this. Large as in, we were about 25 people total. The core team was only about 5 or 6 people. And my role on this project was I was the project lead, and I was the programming lead. So I did most of the coding for the game. But we did have one other main programmer, Paul Ferguson, and a designer and a whole bunch of artists that worked on Tinertia. So what's the game about? Well, so with Tinertia, our goal...
So Vilas, when you say 25 people, what were 25 people? What were the other 20? You had 5 full-time and then 20 contractors. What were they working on?
Artists, yeah. So we actually co-developed with an art studio. And they had a bunch of artists that worked on the game. So it wasn't, a lot of those artists weren't working full-time, but they were, if I add up all the people who touched the game, it would be like 25 people.
Oh, okay, cool. And then do you consider this like a AA project, or A or indie, or what do you think?
I think budget-wise, we're probably lower, much lower than AA today. But yeah, I would say it's an indie project.
Cool.
Yeah. So about the project itself, Tinertia, our goal with this was to create a really awesome indie game, the type of game that we love to play on Xbox or PlayStation, like a Super Meat Boy or a Mario. There's something fun that's very fast and reactive and physicsy. And one of the ideas we were playing with early on was this idea of like a platformer that doesn't have a jump button. And instead you use rocket jumping to move around. So we developed a couple of prototypes. We basically created this like movement mechanic that uses rocket jumping and physics to move yourself around. And yeah, and I won't do a full demo of the game here. We can do that at the end, where I can jump in and sort of show you how the game works. But I can show you just like a quick glimpse of some gameplay footage here on the left, and I'll jump quickly to just the website, just to give you a flavor of like what the game is. Let me turn down the audio here. So yeah, so we've got like basically these 3D levels that you're traversing through. There's a lot of physics interactions between the character and what's happening in the world. There's boss battles at the end of each world, and yeah, and it's all in 3D. So there's actually one kind of unique point of our game is we actually have a VR version where you can play and you can look around the whole world, and it's kind of cool to see like all the levels that are coming up in front of you.
Yeah, that's great. If you could talk about the VR version at some point. We have a huge interest in PSVR, and excited about PSVR 2 possibly coming out.
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely do that. Nope, I seem to have lost my presentation here. Okay. Yeah, I can jump more into actually showing off the game later. I figure I'll just like give you a glimpse so you understand what I'm talking about, and then we can jump into it.
Cool.
Okay, so there's a bunch of steps that we followed to go from our prototype to launch. Now, I'm not saying that this is how all teams will do it, but there were definitely some good things about the approach that we took, and there were some drawbacks, and I'll talk about both of them. But if I were to sort of distill this down into a checklist of what you need to do to get your project from idea / prototype to launch, this would sort of be it. So I would say, prototype first, then figure out a plan for how you're going to develop the rest of the game. Try to do an early vertical slice, which is your demo. Steam Greenlight is no longer a thing you have to worry about, but Steam Early Access is something you can choose to do or not. And I'll talk about maybe why you should or should not do Steam Early Access. Expos, which is game expos like PAX, or E3 or PSX, or why you should do those and what the benefits are. And then we'll talk about some things that happen around launch and maybe what you should focus on around launch. So we'll start off with prototype. I think for us, essentially, we took some assets from like another project that we had, and we just started hacking together a quick prototype of what the main mechanic of the game would be. And prototypes are very useful. I think it's like super important to prototype before you start going down, making a game, because often your ideas are not well formed until you actually try to build them. And and so even for us, like as we started to pull together a prototype, there were some ideas that just didn't work, didn't feel fun, and we were able to get rid of them fairly quickly. We also were able to identify what part of the prototype was feeling really fun and maybe why we should focus on those aspects more. So in our case, it was the rocket jumping, just being able to move this like explosive mechanic was really fun, and we could see that people got stuck into it the moment they picked up the controller and tried it out. And then, we tested a lot of different level ideas. It's easy to do that in prototype when you don't have to deal with art and polish and tuning physics, and there's even tuning camera and some other things like that.
So the prototype is in 2D, and then but the final was in 3D?
It's actually 3D. I don't know how good the image quality is, but yeah, the movement here is 2D, but we were just throwing 3D assets into this world. And, and even the movement code actually is in 3D. So we were testing whether, how much freedom should we give you in 3D versus 2D. But the game is sort of a 2.5D. So it's a 2.5D that switches axis. And I'll demonstrate that.
Cool.
So our prototype, like I said, was 3 weeks. Now this is not 3 weeks from scratch. We were doing development before this, and so we had some tools and assets that we could quickly sort of use to put this together. But still, prototypes are scrappy, and you want to just like throw them together and test your idea. One thing you might ask on the checklist is, why is prototype before plan? Why not plan first and then do a prototype? And this, to me, is more like personal philosophy, but I tend to think of prototype or an idea, game idea, as just a theory. So when you're super excited about something, let's say you just played Smash Brothers and you're like, oh man, wouldn't it be great if we built Smash Brothers, but we added guns or something? Like, that's a theory. that you have, it doesn't really necessarily, mean that your game is going to be successful or not, but you can sort of prove whether that theory works by building a prototype. And it's a great way to see what part of your theory holds up as you start to build things. And I think it's important that your prototype captures some of what's fun about the game. So the other great thing about prototypes is they bring your team into alignment. Oftentimes I find that when people are talking about game design or ideas that they have, you could have a group of people that are all excited about an idea, but really in their heads, they're just imagining like completely different things. And so when you actually sit down to build a prototype, you sort of bring everyone into alignment so that you're all on the same page now and you're all clarifying your ideas to get in sync. And then, yeah, when's a prototype done? This is kind of a nebulous thing. I mean, you could sort of keep prototyping forever if you really wanted to. But to me, it's like once you have something that's fun and you see the promise of like, yeah, we could build this out into a game, then you're done with prototyping. And one of the things I like to illustrate here is it's very important for this. So this is actually where you're seeing here, this image is a prototype of our boss battle. It's one of our boss battles. And it's very important for this to be fun before you spend all the time to do this. Because the left image is like, that's a lot of work. And you want to make sure that you can have fun in just a simple dev art setup before you like expend all the time and energy to actually create the final, polished version of that level. So I'll talk about, you know what, I'll skip this slide. We'll talk about this later. So for our second part in the checklist is the plan. So once you have a prototype, you want to sort of put together a plan of what are we going to build this game for? Who's the audience? What are we going to charge? So in our case, it was very clear to us that we wanted to target Steam and consoles. We were going for the gamer crowd, people who like challenging platformers.
So is that last slide? Is that based on South Park, the Underpants Gnomes business plan?
Yeah. That's actually it's a picture of one of our whiteboards in the office.
That's funny.
But yeah, so in our case, we had these goals of like Steam and console is what we want to target. We want 3D environments because it's going to be different from some of the other platformers that we like. But we don't want to be just like another Meat Boy. We had a rough range of price point, 15 to 25, but we weren't really sure what the final price point should be. So we just had a loose range. We knew we wanted to do Steam Early Access, but at the time we didn't really understand what the dynamics of Steam Early Access are, and I'll actually talk about this a little more, when you should and should not consider Steam Early Access. And then initially we thought, oh, we'll spend a year to build this. But if you look at the timeline, it took more like 3.5 years. So this was like just us being way too optimistic, but this is very common in a lot of development teams that I see. Like developers tend to be overly optimistic. So yeah, just be prepared to like spend some time if you really want to take it to console and Steam. And then as far as planning goes, what do you need to focus on? Well, your plan is not it's not like commandments. You're definitely going to stray from your plan, but it's a good exercise to do because you want to capture how much work you're planning to do in your game. So a good example of this is when we were building our prototype, we took one of the prototype scenes and started to build art for it. And we realized, like polishing one of these levels is taking about a week or 2 weeks. And we were planning to have 100 levels. So you get like 200 weeks of work, right? So quickly after planning, we realized, oh, that's not going to be feasible. We need to change either the way the levels are set up, or we need to change how we're creating the art if we want to reach 100 levels, or we change the number of levels. So planning just helps you wrap your head around how much work you're planning to do in order to actually build this game, and it might help you make some good decisions. You want to create a first draft of your game design doc, and I tend to believe in having a very loose doc where it's very high level. It doesn't dictate exactly like what button press does what. We tend to focus on high level because oftentimes development is very iterative, it's very reactive. You want the ability to change without having to like capture every single nuance of your game in a document. But this can be different based on the team you're working with. If you're working for a very large company, they might have a different approach of actually like having an extremely detailed design doc that everyone follows.
So, Floss, and I think Aaron also, like, some of the things you're talking about is timeless, and some I'm not sure as much about. Like, and you started this back in 2013, using Unity and then using outside contractors, and so I think like, maybe you can also talk about some of the things that have changed since 2013 to how things might be different now. Obviously, a GDD seems like it would be pretty similar, but other things might not be.
Yeah, I can definitely go into that. I mean, in terms of, we started our sort of ideation in 2013. We launched on PS4 in 2017. So, I can talk about sort of more of that process of like getting onto Sony's platform.
Yeah, and there definitely wasn't even VR in 2013 for you to even think about in this GDD probably.
Yeah, no, our initial GDD did not have VR, although we did add VR to the game when we launched in 2017. Yeah, and then I guess other things if you're plan, I would say like, plan to do expos. They're a great way to get exposure for a game, and just create some milestones that you can hit on the way to launch. So yeah, I mean, this is on our checklist. So I'll go maybe faster through some of the early stages and talk more about the later ones.
No, you can go. It's your presentation. Okay. We actually have till 10 p.m. So take your time.
So the next step would be creating a vertical slice, a demo of your game to sort of prove the idea. Now in our case, this was, we were like, okay, we'll create a small set of levels and we'll present it, we'll sort of pitch it at GDC Next. This was like GDC Next 2014. And so we set out to, with this set of levels and a pitch to Sony to see if we could, get on their platform. And this demo, what I liked about it is it kind of forced us to start thinking about, oh, what's the design of the game? What's the look? What's the main character? Like before this, we didn't really care. We were just focused on mechanics and playing the game. But now we actually have to start to realize what the game looks like. Now this can be, again, depending on the team, this can be quite different. Some teams like to start with the visual, and then they'll figure out like what the mechanics are. We tend to start with the mechanics and then figure out what the visuals should be. Yeah, and so we started doing just like rough concept, like look development, how are the levels structured, again, testing different like environments and looks, lighting and shaders, what kind of lighting do we want? How expensive is that going to be? And then slowly kind of developing out the main character. Let's see, I can show you a few videos of the early sort of prototype version. So here's just this is just a very simple Unity scene where we're just throwing together some elements and testing out the rocket jumping. And we're testing it out, how it interacts with physics objects, what kind of other objects we might want in the scene. Very simple test. Like, this is something you could throw together, in a few weeks.
Yeah, looks like fun. I mean, this seems to be almost like a finished phaser game, like Allison would make.
Well,
But then,
I mean, yeah, it's like a prototype. You just focus on a few things. So all we were focused here on is like, how good does the movement feel, and how good do the rocket jumping physics feel?
and then when you did this in Unity, right? Did you know your final game engine would be Unity, or did you just use Unity because it was free at that point and Unreal Engine wasn't, or how did that decision come about?
It was a combination of a lot of things, but yes, we did consider Unreal, but it was expensive at the time. Myself, I had about 6 years in Unity experience already. So we were like really, really good at Unity. The team in general had a lot of Unity experience. And so Unreal, the only reason we'd have gone to Unreal is if it was cheaper and we decided like it's a lot better than Unity. But at the time, it was not cheaper. So we had no reason to switch from Unity. Unity would have been our go-to decision either way.
Okay. So, I mean, you did that before Unity3D came out as well. So,
this was before that. Yeah, this was Unity version. I think it was one of the early 4s or 3.9 or something. Here's a test of setting up a level where we're just like throwing in some assets to see how detailed or how how are the levels structured? How are we using the depth of the 3D? And how much can we put in the scene before it's like too noisy, or it doesn't, you can't tell where the track is that you're supposed to be platforming on. So these are just initial tests where we're trying to figure out what does our world look like.
So what did it take to go from the last video to this video? It's like night and day difference.
This is just a couple of weeks. So we're, there's no textures here. There's very little. We've just thrown in some lights and some fog to make it kind of moody. There's not much asset development other than the mesh. So we had artists who were creating this mesh to throw into the level. So it's not too much effort. However, this is also not close to the final that we ended up with.
Yeah, I mean, it looks even that version looks pretty good for 3 weeks work compared to from the prototype 3 weeks.
Yeah, visuals go a long way. It can make a pretty large difference. Here's some other test levels where we're testing, like, this is like a magnet mechanic test. So we're testing, like, you get stuck on the magnet, you peel yourself off, and you got to like stick yourself on it again. And then you got to do this like tough platforming section and attach the magnet again. So it's just a level where you're like trying to chase this elevator.
So it almost seems like, so these 3 videos, it's almost you just showed 3 separate games. In today's world, you could have launched 3 separate games as hyper casual or just been done with it.
That's not the audience we're going for, though.
Yeah.
So we were going for the console hardcore audience. Yeah.
So you needed, like, how many hours of gameplay were you looking to develop when you started out, and then how many did you wind up producing?
Yeah, so I would say Tinertia is maybe for the average person, it would be about 6 hours of gameplay. For a very skilled person, it might be like 2 or 3 hours of gameplay. If you're like a hardcore platformer enthusiast, and you're really good, maybe 2-3 hours you beat the game.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not going to be like we don't compare to AAA where it's like 20 hours or 30. You know, we're not doing story, we're not doing dialogue.
Yeah.
It's a much simpler setup, but yeah, it is a good amount of work.
But when you say like 2 to 3 hours, like as a platformer, I mean, could you just make the levels harder so they can just continuously play it?
You can, however, you making it harder is an easy way to make your game longer. It's not a way to make your game better. If you just make your game very hard, people will play it and get frustrated and be like, "This is unfair," and yeah, they won't bother finishing it. Yeah.
Hmm.
So yeah, difficulty is something that it's easy to use it as a crutch just to like make your game longer. In fact, that's what very early gaming used to do. You know, when the Atari and like the early Mega Mans and stuff, they couldn't put a lot of content in there, so they just made the game really hard. So you really spent a lot of time. But people don't have that kind of patience anymore because you have so much variety now of what you can play. You're
Yeah.
not going to sit there and play the same level a billion times.
So what's that called then? I know, like, you know, when you do Mega Man or Super Mario or this, right? You know, there's a beginning of the game, the end of the game. You can beat the game, but then a game like Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, old school, like, you know, you can keep playing Pac-Man. Yeah, there is an end of the game. You can beat Pac-Man, I think, at some point, but only a handful of people have ever done it. Generally, you're just playing the same level over and over again. Like, what's that concept called when you keep just playing the same skill level over and over again?
I don't know if there's a name for it, but it is basically, yeah, like old school gaming. They would basically give you 1 or 2 levels, and then the entire goal of it was to defeat it and to get a high score, and that was how you added replayability. However, the trend has really moved away from that. Like, you're not going to see a AAA company do that. You know, where it's like one level and you just have to beat it. Now people want, you know, they want a journey. They want like to see variety. So that concept still works in the indie space. There are a lot of awesome indie games that have that very tight one level, and all you do is replay and you try to, you know, be really good at it. In our case, though, we just weren't going for that. For a platformer, it doesn't really make sense because the joy of a platformer is the discovering levels, and so just giving you a few levels that you have to just play over and over, that doesn't work for a platformer anymore.
Okay.
Oh, I guess I went over this part. We can skip this. Okay, so we created this demo. We took 3 months and we made a demo where we had some nice art on it, and we had 5 levels that you could play through and beat. And it was interesting. We put it out there, we showed it off, and we had people play, and we got a lot of critique on it, both positive and negative, and it was all very helpful. And one of the things we learned is that our game was way too difficult. And this was something that I now see this a lot in a lot of indie developers, and I think it's just a natural tendency that happens when you're developing a game, because you play it so much. You're like an expert player, essentially. You're like the world's, you know, best player of your own game, and so you tend to build the difficulty too high, and you don't realize until you watch other people play that, oh, it's just like stupidly difficult, and other people aren't going to enjoy this. So we did start to see this with the demo. There were certain parts of the levels that people were just like, it's not for me. It's like too hard. And this was a really important learning. The other thing we realized is that our art was very complex and very noisy. And while it did look cool, it wasn't really adding anything to the game. It wasn't helping you read the level better. And it also wasn't all that unique that it would be like very recognizable or something. And so we kind of realized like we need to take a second look at how we're putting together our art style. In fact, you know, this picture here is a picture from a prototype scene that has no art. It's just cubes. However, with a little bit of lighting and fog, it actually it looks cooler than some of our like super arted up scenes. And there was a nice like clean clarity to this level that we were missing in our scenes where we put in a lot of art, and it was just very noisy. So the other thing we realized, or not realized, the other critique we got, and this was when we pitched to Sony. So we basically reached out to Sony, got in contact with an account manager, and they actually let us come in and just do a simple pitch based on our demo, and we put together some, a few slides like pitching our game. So from the pitch, we kind of got critique that, while the mechanic was interesting, there was nothing else that really was iconic, or nothing that like really stood out about our game that people could identify with other than the mechanic.
So was this a pitch on stage, or how do these pitches work?
So we went to their offices in Foster City, and yeah, we went into just a conference room, and we had our laptop, and we just presented to an account manager and the Sony second or third party IP head was there, and yeah, we just did a 20-minute pitch.
So, and how did you get that meeting to begin with? Through GDC Next, or?
We reached out through contacts, essentially, and ended up getting in touch with a Sony account manager. So the account managers are people who talk to indie developers, and they'll maintain a relationship. Once you actually sign on with Sony as a third-party developer, they'll give you your dev kits. They'll essentially help you get through the process.
Cool. And then, what do they charge for the indie devs to get a dev kit, all that other stuff? I guess it's changed over the years, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about that.
Yeah, no worries.
But I can tell you that they are very indie friendly, so they tend to waive a lot of the fees that go along with getting kits or submissions, or so they tend to actually waive most of the fees that they charge bigger companies.
Cool.
And so yeah, so at the end of this demo, it was, from our perspective, it was like a little bit of, not bad news per se, but we had to step back and rethink. There were some ideas were working really well, some were not working that well. And so we clearly had to think about, okay, what are we going to change? Because we don't want to just continue down this path and get the same critique. So let me just take a sip here. So the outcome of our demo was that we had to rethink the art style. The art was taking too long to make. Each level was taking too long to make. Plus, it wasn't really paying off in that it wasn't helping the platforming, and it wasn't really helping us stand out all that much. So we decided to go for a simpler, more abstract art style. We decided to separate the track that you're playing on from the background environment a lot more, so it's very clear visually what you are supposed to interact with and what you're not supposed to interact with. We also added an axis switching mechanic, so at the end of certain levels, the plane that you're playing on changes, and that way you get to explore this 3D space in a more interesting way. Excuse me. I'm losing my voice here. And then from the demo, we also realized that there are some weird edge cases about our movement system that we needed to solve in order to improve the experience. So after the demo, we sort of emerged with this new direction that we wanted to follow. And yeah, the new art style that we ended up with is I think we actually ended up with something that is pretty unique and feels very Tinertia, like it's something that you recognize. It's not very generic looking, and it's kind of unique to our game. Any questions until this point?
No, I think we're good.
Yeah, okay. So the next step on our checklist was getting on Steam. And back when we did this, so we were doing this in 2014, 2015. You had to go through Greenlight. I'll kind of skip this because Greenlight no longer exists. But the long and short of it was that, you know, it was an interesting community vetted process, and you had very little control. And basically, Valve decided whether you could join their platform or not. We were lucky enough to get on fairly quickly. But you know, you no longer have to really deal with this. So that's good. Now you can just like put your game on Steam for a small fee.
So then, did you get on because of a trailer, or did people actually play the game and try it out and give you feedback, or what was the process of getting positive feedback to get on?
So yeah, the way you do it is you create a Greenlight page, and all it is people vote. The community votes, and your page can have some videos, and yeah, that's
Do they
it.
actually have, like, could they play a level, or how did they just watch the video, or how
No.
did it work back then?
Just a trailer, yeah. So
Oh,
the
okay.
one good thing about Greenlight is it forced us to make a trailer, which was also an interesting experience. So this is our Greenlight page. So yeah, this is basically our pitch to the Steam community to please greenlight us so that we can launch our game on Steam.
So was this totally like a meritocracy, or was it just the most popular person in school type wins type thing?
It was fairly, so it was rapidly changing during the time that we were applying, but basically the Steam community decided. There was nothing from Valve that influenced the process. The community was just given you know, a list of games that they could vote on, and they could watch the trailer and they could decide which idea they liked. And yeah, it was kind of like a Kickstarter in a way, but there's no money involved.
So what do people like about your trailer? What made this trailer good enough to get upvoted?
It's a good question. I mean, I think we sort of we approached it from the aspect of like, we're all gamers on the team, so what would we like to see in a really awesome platformer? So we focused on the rocket jumping part of it, you know, and the challenge of like escaping. And you can kind of see in our trailer, there's actually a lot of like very early demo footage in here of uncompleted levels. But we're trying to show the excitement of the mechanic. And I think we succeeded at that. You know, we were showing like, here's the challenge that you're going to enjoy, and here's this cool mechanic. And so, yeah, I mean, if you look at the comments, like people were really like excited by that. And so they were like, yeah, you know, go for it.
So that's interesting that you did like an all play mechanic video with like the rocket jumping, where I've seen like a lot of game trailers where like it's almost like a movie trailer, right? You with the voiceover. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering if, like, you know, if you're a filmmaker making a game trailer, rather a game developer making a game trailer, if, you know, knowing your audience, right? This is for Steam, you know, what do they want? Not what do people on YouTube want, for example?
Well, I think that depends on the type of game you're making. If you're making a game that's about story, then I would say go for a cinematic trailer. We were not making a game that's about story. Our game was purely about like the rush of platforming at high speed and the challenge. So, but you know, if you're making like, I don't know, some kind of like action RPG or something, maybe you can do both. You can do some gameplay and some cinematic. Let's skip to post Greenlight. So, okay, so early access still exists. This hasn't really changed, and this is very much applicable today. So let's talk about early access and why it's significant. One of the reason we decided to do early access was we wanted to get feedback early. We wanted to get people playing the game and get us feedback. And we also thought that we'll get some early revenue from people buying the game early. And so that way we don't have to wait until launch until we get revenue from the game. Now, while this is true, you do get some early revenue. There's caveats here because early access is also kind of the first impression that people get of your game. And if you're not far enough along, your first impression is not going to be good enough for them to really spread the word about your game. Now, in our case, we did get some good first impressions. However, there were bugs and things that we needed to sort out. And so it was both good and bad. Like we got some great feedback. We were able to make the game a lot more robust. And we thought we'll add content as it's completed. So as we're finishing a world, we'll put it out there, and you'll get it on early access. Now, yeah, and of course you'll start building your community, which I think was actually the best use case for us in terms of early access. We did actually build a genuine community that was like keeping track of the game and constantly talking to us, and we're super excited about stuff. Oops, sorry, I messed a slide here. Okay, so takeaways from early access. We got feedback on the mechanics, the bugs. We got to see people play for many hours and see what their play patterns were. Not all games are good for early access. I think in our case, I think our type of game is actually not ideal for early access because the fun of our game is to experience the levels and play through. Getting that in piecemeal is not actually the best experience of the game. I think games that are suited for early access are more like a multiplayer game where they have most of the content and the game is ready, but they just need to test the maps and tune the weapons. And it's like the last 20% of tweaking that needs to happen. I think early access is better for those types of games.
So how long is ideal to be in early access? I've seen some games that have been early access for years and they still aren't finished. Is that okay, or what's your take?
Honestly, I don't think it matters because there's like a wide variety of projects that have been successful or failed and have been in early access for a very short time or very long time. I think the best launch you could possibly have is one where the first version that you put out is as close to the final as possible. And I think that's why AAA studios still tend to go for that model because when you do marketing for a game and you build hype and then people buy it, they're getting like the best version of the game that they could possibly get, or as close to it as possible. Doing piecemeal, giving your game in like a first and a second version, it can work, but it's messier and it's not the best experience for the consumer. Although some people on Steam enjoy that. They enjoy that initial process of talking to the devs.
Yeah, maybe we should go into Steam in general, Steam Store and early access. I think a lot of people who are going to be watching this this video later on, this will be their first introduction to these concepts. So basically, is Steam still the #1 place for you to put your game? And then what is early access aspect of that?
If your target is PC gamers, then yes, Steam is by far the best store. Probably followed by, Epic is like now coming up quickly and putting a lot of effort and money into promoting the store.
And then early access, is it always free, or do you actually get some revenue when you do early access?
So early access is so the concept of early access is that I can start selling the game before it's launched in an early state, and that the consumer is aware that this is an early state that they're purchasing. So they know that this game is not complete, but they like what they see and they want to participate in an early version of the game and help the developer sort of, get it to launch.
So the audience, people who purchase early access, like what is their psychographic? Why are they purchasing early access versus people who buy finished games?
You purchase early access just because you saw the game and you really like it and you want to try it out right now, but you know that it's not complete and you're okay with that. You're okay with it being a little buggy or crashy or things changing,
Right.
but you're invested enough in this idea that you really want to play it now and you want to be part of the community that talks to the developers.
So was it helpful as far as like the feedback you got, or was it, one of the horror stories you hear is about the trolls who basically aren't very kind to early devs on Steam too? How was your experience with that?
Our experience was great. I mean, the community was like, they were super responsive. They were like giving us all sorts of ideas. They were showing us bugs. They were, yeah, they were streaming the game. They were like, we essentially got to watch people play the game for hours and learn stuff from that just because they were streaming it. So I think in general, here's what I would say about maybe people being harsh on Steam. If you're very honest with them and upfront, they will, I think, interact with you really well. What you don't want to do, I've seen like indie devs where they try to have a tendency to try to do like the AAA PR stuff where everything, they don't want to answer too many questions, or they want to like try to maintain that like PR shine,
Yeah.
but I would say don't worry about that. Just tell them like what you're working on, what you're not working on. So we had a situation in early access where we realized like, one of the worlds that we're working on, it's not turning out that great. The mechanics were just not feeling that good, and we had promised that the game would have 8 worlds. And so at some point, I basically just reached out to the community. I was like, you know what? We were planning 8 worlds. We're now doing 7 because one of the worlds we're just not happy with it, and we'd rather not put it out and have it be like the world that nobody likes.
So sounds like you are really good at community engagement. You're basically you're your own best like community relations person. And is that
Maybe
just your natural
I'm not.
personality, or how did that
No,
work?
no, I'm not a people person at all. I'm a programmer, so
Yeah.
I don't like interacting
Or
with people all that much.
or did you
But
have a community manager who basically created this community, or curated it once they got onto your page and kept them engaged? Or
no, we just we talked to the community ourselves, and we were just like very frank with them whenever we were
okay.
doing something. And I think like the Steam community is sharp. Like they notice stuff. They'll if you try to like pull one over them, they'll notice it and they'll start talking about it. So it's best just to be upfront with them and tell them what you're working on. And yeah, I don't know. I've had good experiences on Steam, just like talking to people. You will always get some person who's maybe not being reasonable, or they're just like in a really bad mood, or they don't like your game at all. Like they just hate it for some reason. And that's fine. There's like a few of those around, but I think if you make something, you're always going to get a critic. So, I think having a critic is like a sign that you've made something worth talking about.
Yeah, but even critics can be helpful, but when you
I don't
also get
mind.
people who don't care at all, you say
Yeah.
it's a zombie project and no one's commenting. And
Yeah, that's a bad sign. I would say you're actually better off with people critiquing your game harshly, because that means they care, and that harsh critique is very useful. I would say, if people are just telling you everything's fine, you're not getting any useful information out of that. It's the people who are like, oh man, this level's really broken, or this like one jump in this part is like really stupid and annoying. Those people who are being harsh, they're telling you what's wrong. In a straightforward way, and so it's good to listen to that. You don't have to agree with that as a creator. You can choose to ignore that and be like, you know what, I really want that jump in there. It's important for me. But yeah, I think harsh critique is very useful.
cool.
So the other nice side effect of early access was it kind of proved to Sony and Microsoft, because we were a very young team, and it kind of proved that, hey, we could actually like build something and put it out there and have people use it, and it's reliable. So it does legitimize you to have something that's launched and have a community that's using it and talking to you about it. And that helps with when you're talking with Sony or Microsoft, because they talk to a lot of teams, and they have to decide eventually, whether this team is capable of launching something on their platform. And so they're not just going to give out dev kits to like every person they meet. They decide whether they want to do that or not with you. So having past titles or even putting your game on early access and getting a decent response does help. And so this is the one big caveat that we didn't really understand when we first went on early access. We naively, I think we thought that, oh, we'll get early access revenue and then the launch will happen, and the launch will be just as good as it would have been without early access. But really, some of those purchases that you're getting in early access, you're basically losing those at launch. And so, and early access, the other thing I forgot to mention, usually it's a discounted price because the person who's buying in is buying in early. So it's just something to keep in mind. Like it's not like the early access adds on to the launch revenues. You're basically taking a bit of your launch revenue and getting it early. All right, so we're closer to launch here. So the last bit before launch, before you actually get to launch your game, that I would highly recommend is doing expos. So expos like PAX or even GDC or E3 or whatever you can. It is super awesome. Even if it's not like a big name expo, even if it's a smaller expo, showing your game to lots of people and watching them interact with it is very enlightening.
Did you show this at VR LA or anything like that?
No, we have not shown a VR early. At the time we were not focused on VR early on. So we were kind of showing it, and actually I don't think 2015, 16, yeah, I guess VR LA had just was still happening, but anyways, we weren't that focused on VR at the time. So yeah, I mean, in general, this is us talking to some of our hardcore fans.
Are you in that picture?
Oh no, I'm probably taking the picture.
I'm like, dude, you changed a lot.
No, that's Ferg, our programmer, or he was a programmer on this project, and then Jeffrey on the right, who's a composer. Here's me on the left. We're talking to Man vs. Game on Twitch about Tinertia. So yeah, it's just a great experience. You'll get to meet the people who love your game, and you'll get a lot of feedback. Again, you'll get critique, you'll get harsh critique, and you'll get positive critique, and it's really enlightening to see that. And it's good if you act on that advice, because yeah, you're going to see how people actually interact with your game. You can minimize the cost of doing an expo by applying with there are companies that help indies basically do expos for very low cost. Unfortunately, I think Indie Mega Booth now is sort of in hiatus, but there's Mix, there's other companies that you can look up. But there are ways to do it cheaply. And then press, it's a good place to actually interact with press and get them interested in your project. They're not going to approach you, so you need to reach out to them before you do an expo and let them know that you're going to be there, and set up some appointments. So Steam launch. Launch date is important. I think even if you're indie, you want to pick a day that's not coinciding with some massive AAA launch. Not because you're competing with AAA, but because all of games media and everyone's focus is going to be on that AAA launch, and so that's going to eat up. It's basically going to eat up all the oxygen in the room, and there's going to be less talk about the indies or smaller projects that come out during that time. It's okay to cut things to hit your launch deadline, and like I said, we had to cut an entire world, which was a set of 10 levels, and we were really bummed about it. But we made the decision, like, we're just going to tell our community on Steam right away, and they were totally fine with it. So yeah, if you need to cut a few things to hit your launch, that's better than delaying constantly. And then you want to plan some kind of marketing push to go with your launch. Your launch does not guarantee like visibility. Because the game market right now is so saturated. There's so many games, so many awesome choices for you to spend your money on, that it's not guaranteed that you're going to get visibility just because you launched. You need to actually get some streamers or YouTubers or just do some marketing in general. And Steam gives you a certain set of impressions when you launch that help them evaluate, how people. Well, it helps them evaluate how to rank your game on the store. So the reason certain games keep showing up to the front is because they have a good click-through rate based on that initial 1 million impressions. And then avoid, as a developer, just avoid like working yourself to the point of exhaustion. It can be hard. Launch can be a stressful time.
So you showed pictures of your team. How are you able to keep your core team together over the course of years?
Not the whole team that was on Tinertia has been with me through all these years. But so like Jeff, who's our composer, is still working with us. Our programmer Ferb, who's in that picture, he's moved on to something else. So yeah, it's our core team is very small. It's only like 3 people.
So, I mean, did you have to, like, I mean, obviously you couldn't pay salaries for years and years, so it's just all delayed or
No,
equity,
this is paid. Yeah, this is paid. So everyone was paid. Yeah. So we self-funded based on the contract work that we do for other companies.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can, if you want to do like the very, very indie approach, you can try to do like the, promise revenue splits and all that. But for the amount of work that we're doing, that would not be, it would not be probable. Like you would not reach launch.
So while you're doing this, how did you split your time between the contract work and working on this game?
I would say we split it about 80-20. So we spent about 80% of the time working on our project, and then we spent about 20% of the time on other projects that were like we worked on Dead Realm, which is another is a game built by streamers. It was like a 4-player co-op game. So we did some network programming for that. So yeah, we normally spend most of our time on contract. However, once we're ramping up to like put together one of our games, we then shift to where we spend more time on our own projects.
Sure. And then what was the synergies of doing it that way, of working on other projects while you're working on this? Or
I mean, it's not ideal. In an ideal world, I would just work on our own stuff. But we have to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of delays your own stuff. So there were times where we had to push back certain updates and things because we were like, well, we just don't have the bandwidth right now.
Yeah, I mean, what's actually surprising about what you said is the 80-20 split. I thought it would be 20-80, right? You're spending 20% on your own game and 80% on contract, because that's the typical.
Well, that's what we normally do. That's what we normally do. So normally we're doing mostly contract.
Okay.
But then we don't put out a game every year. So it's been like 3 years now since we did Tinertia. So we tend to do fewer of our own games. But yeah, if we were like funded or completely funded, then we'd probably do more games.
Okay. And then, so when I say synergies, right, was one of the things that like kept your team involved and motivated was they could have a creative outlet to work on something they found very stimulating if they did the perhaps more drudge type work of paying the bills or contracting to keep you more involved and more motivated long term, or like what other synergies were there from doing it like this besides getting a paycheck from the contract work?
I think for all of us on the team, we were just like super focused on building our own game. And when the core team is like only 3 or 4 people, like you're getting to do a lot on this game. So you're a big part of the game development. So I don't think there was any like, I don't think we had any problems with like motivation. We were all super excited to like get this out there and get it on a console and just like get gamers, playing it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the motivation, I think, is I think also a question of, I guess you're in LA, people are more, I don't know, the industry is probably more established, but I think here in Florida, people, it's not as established, and I think people could might not have the attention span. Like they might work on one person's game with one team, but also have their own other teams as well. So not working on just one team.
Oh, I think, okay, I understand what you're saying. Yeah. So
yeah, so they might switch, and you'll lose their interest for another team or their own projects.
Well, so yeah, I mean the people who I was working with, like Ferg and Justin Biller, they were not like this was not their first game development job. They had worked in the industry for like 5 or 6 years, kind of like myself. So we were not we were not hobbyists like transitioning to this indie developers type of thing. We were like pretty seasoned developers who were deciding to make a sort of a game that we would love to play on Steam or PS4. So that's why I think that's how you get the focus. If you're pulling together like some hobbyists, then I could see maybe they're doing a bunch of different projects and they have their own thing going, and
yeah. And then this team itself, was this your first project together, or have you been working on other projects before?
We had worked together in the past at different companies. So this was the first time that we were, I guess, sort of the top people in the team, right? In the past, we were part of the dev team, and so you have like 20-something senior people above you, and they're handling all the other stuff, and we're just focused on like programming or development. But this was the first time where we had to talk to the community. We had to reach out to Sony and try to get contacts. We had to try to do a pitch, which none of us had really ever done. But it was a great learning experience, and it was kind of cool to like try to do these other things that normally someone else would do. It's kind of the difference between being indie versus working at a larger like development studio.
Okay.
And it's rewarding. I would say it is rewarding to actually be the person who gets to work on the game and also talk to the community and talk to the fans. It's a good feeling. It's a lot of work, but if you enjoy it, you'll have a good time with it. Okay, and then let's talk about PS4 launch. So Steam, launching on Steam is actually fairly easy in terms of just technical requirements. Steam, or Valve rather, doesn't really care. They don't care how robust your game is or how bug-free it is. They're solely evaluating whether your game is, well, they have some set of requirements that you have to meet, but for the most part, you're very free to do kind of whatever you want in your game. And if it crashes or whatever, they're relying on customers to sort that out, to review your game and tell people that, this game is too buggy or this game is kind of broken. they are not going to stop you from launching something that's fairly broken. Console is not like that at all. In console, your game has to be really, really robust, and there's a long QA process that you have to go through just to be able to launch on console. So before you get to that, though, you have to start building some kind of relationship with Sony and Microsoft. I will say I was actually quite surprised for them being very large companies. They're actually not that hard to reach out to and talk to.
You said Microsoft because of Xbox?
Yeah, we were talking to Xbox as well. They're actually quite easy to reach out to. You can even do it through social media, through Twitter or something. But they have established ways of indie developers to reach out to them and get dev kits and all that. So I was actually quite surprised by that when we started. However, you're not, just because you're talking to them doesn't mean you're going to get a dev kit. And if you're not familiar, a dev kit is basically it is a developer version of the console that you have to test your software on. And without that, you cannot launch on a console. So Sony or Microsoft, they have to send you a dev kit, and you have to develop on that with a custom set of tools that they provide you, and you have to do a lot of testing. And then, so to get to that point, you do need to build a little bit of a relationship with them until you get your dev kit and talk to them when you run into issues, because you are going to run into issues. There are some hardware realities about console. Your typical console is not a PC. It is, in some ways, it can be much less powerful than a PC, especially in terms of CPU. And so when you're building for Steam, a lot of times you can get away with your game not being very optimal. However, that's not true for console. For console, you really have to focus on optimization, and especially if you want to hit 60 frames per second, which is what we were aiming for. So yeah, just be prepared to put in that work.
So Vilas, I'm just gonna pause for a second. So when you get into the PSVR aspect, I'll have Paul Bronstein, who just joined the meeting, be the one who interviews you. He's the head of XR Miami.
Okay.
Cool, and he's the person we sang "Happy Birthday" to yesterday for the in the Avatar meetup.
Belated happy birthday.
Thank you very much, Praveen, for that again. That was an awesome thing you guys did. I appreciate it.
And then let's introduce all the new people who just arrived. Rita, do you want to introduce yourself? Whenever she unmutes herself, she'll unmute. And then Robert, do you want to introduce yourself? We were waiting earlier.
Sure. Rob Helstray. I work with Microsoft tools such as C#, Xamarin to build out apps for iOS and Android. I don't know if and when I'll ever be a game developer. What I have been doing, though, recently is writing gamified applications. Just published green shoots to the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. So
what's it
as
called?
an application developer, this is really...
Green what?
What's that?
You said you published green shoots?
It's called Green Shoots. It's designed to encourage eco-friendly lifestyles and, just kind of a fun gamified app.
Right. And then what about your Marvel posters app?
That was an augmented reality app. So I've tried to incorporate AI and AR into my applications. The Marvel comic posters, that was just to kind of augment, say you're at a movie theater, you have your iPad, for example, and you put it up. You can't show the camera with a poster. It'll augment the poster with information. And this was specifically for the Avengers movie cast. So I think I did 8 or 10 characters and did a couple hackathons, etc. But I come to the game developer group to kind of adopt the mindset of a game developer. I think it'll help me as an application developer.
Cool, man. So welcome back. All right, so Rita just messaged me on Facebook saying somehow she can't unmute her mic. So when she figures it out, she'll unmute herself. As a host on Google Meet, I can't unmute her for her, so she'll figure it out. All right, cool. So Vilas, when you can just continue, and then when you get to the VR portion, Paul will unmute himself to take over the meetup from there.
Sounds good. Yeah, so I guess I was talking about launching on a console, or in our case, specifically PlayStation. You need to prepare, or you need to set aside some development time for optimization, because that's going to be important for console, especially for our type of game where we want it to hit 60 frames per second. This is something that I tell every indie developer that I meet, or any developer in general who's doing games, especially in Unity. The asset store is sort of a double-edged sword. I think if you're using it to buy assets or shaders or textures, that's totally fine. If you're using it to buy middleware, and you're planning to do console, there's like this version hell that you'll go through where your middleware may not work exactly the way you want it to on the PlayStation version of Unity. So Unity has separate branches of software depending on, for the consoles. And that is something that can bite you, like, so for our case, we were using a couple of middleware. We tend to be very conservative about using middleware, but we still were using like Playmaker and a few other things. And at the end of the day, I had to basically replace everything we're using because, some version of Playmaker had a bug on the PS4 branch, and then they updated, and then that bug got fixed, but some other thing started breaking. And so at some point, I was like, this is not worth it. We're spending too much time trying to wrangle all these different versions. We stripped it all out and we just replaced it with code. And that took time and effort, but we had to do it to launch. Yeah, in fact, the only middleware that made it into Tinertia was ProBuilder. But we were using that to build our level geometry, collision geometry. But yeah, that was fairly reliable, and we had a great experience using that. Console Q&A, you've probably maybe heard the term TRC, but it's a dreaded process for most developers. It is a long checklist of tests that you have to pass in order to be eligible to sell your game on PlayStation. And so, yeah, in our case, Tinertia qualified for some 110 tests that we had to pass. And if you fail any one of those, you're not getting on the store. So again, it's just about, you just have to go through each test and meet the exact requirement that they want you to meet. So it could be simple stuff like, so here's an example of a TRC just to give you some context. The user is playing your game and they hit a save point, but they're out of space. Your game needs to be able to stop, let them know that you're not able to save because you're out of space. Then the user should be able to exit the game, or not exit, but suspend the game, make space, come back to the game, and continue where they left off. Now, this is something that you take for granted in most console games that you play, but as a developer, you have to handle that case. Your game has to handle that case in an intelligent way. It has to understand that, like, oh, I was trying to save, but I have to stop now. And when I come back, I need to check again to see if I can save. And the game has to handle that gracefully. On Steam, if your disk is out of space, the game can just crash, and Valve is like, whatever, that's fine. And most PC gamers they're sort of used to a little more jank in those edge case scenarios, but on console, the experience has to be flawless. So yeah, there's 110 of these cases in our case that we had to make sure we're good in order to pass console QA. And then Microsoft has a very similar process that also you have to go through. And then, yeah, there are some Unity3D specific issues that I can talk on a high level about. So Unity does have separate branches for console. There can be issues with like those branches don't update the same way that the regular branches do. You could be working on a branch that has some bug, and then you can't launch with that because Sony says you can't launch with that bug. So there's a little bit of headache that you have to deal with, and so I would say just like plan for extra time to deal with those issues, because I have multiple developer friends who have gone through this process as well, and we all kind of run into the same thing where you're dealing with version hell essentially.
So Vilas, let me interrupt. So can we take a break and then let Aaron present for a little bit and give feedback to Allison on her game, because he has his cat at the vet. So we.
Oh yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
I'm
So,
actually. I think this is my last slide. So.
Okay, and then we'll get into the. So then after Aaron portion, we'll come back to you, and then Paul can interview you for the PSVR, and then Rita will be on that call portion of the call as well. So
good.
Allison, if you want to, you guys, Allison, Aaron, if you want to unmute yourselves. And Allison, if you want to share your screen and bring up your game as well, and Aaron will give you feedback and we'll look at your game.
Okay. Where is the?
There's a bunch of stuff, Allison. If you just want to get ready, I'll comment on Vilas's stuff.
Okay.
For just a second to add to just add to it and accentuate and highlight stuff. Everything Vilas said was really good. So I'll give you time to get in the spotlight, Allison.
Okay.
Vilas, that was amazing. Everything you said was great. It's very similar to what I teach kids. So again, to the new people, I teach role-playing game design and board and card game design, but analog. I'm all analog, but everything that Vilas was talking about applies to the, it's applicable very much on both sides of the coin. So on a larger design perspective on this, these are kind of the things that I teach that help. And so hopefully this will help you guys for game designers if you're designing. So what I teach the kids is that there's 5 elements to a game. And these 5 elements are a goal, rules, mechanics, components, and content, or what I call fluff, because kids remember fluff. Goal, rules, mechanics, components, fluff, 5 elements. And my sentence is that the players use the mechanics to manipulate the fluffy components within the rules to achieve a goal. And that's what a game is. So you use the mechanics to manipulate fluffy components within the rules to achieve a goal. That's kind of my main sort of thing to think about if you look at that. And Vilas was mentioning a lot of this stuff. So we'll talk about this. I teach the iterative process, which means what you do, you make the game, you release it, you get feedback, you incorporate that feedback, you reiterate, you give it feedback again, you just keep going back and forth in this loop. And Vilas mentioned, like, when are you done? Which is a question, when are you done? And it's when it's fun. And I'll get back to that in a second. The core loop is what the game that his game Tinertia did. What was the core loop? The core loop was jumping platform. That was the core loop being the mechanic. What is the main mechanic that you're going to do over and over and over again? And that has to be fun and enjoyable. And that was enjoyable in Tinertia. It was jumping with a rocket, right? So instead of jumping, that's the core loop that keeps going. That's the main mechanic that you're manipulating your little guy to get stuff. So this is the one thing that's actually really interesting that I think about, which is fun. So all my kids, and Vilas said, and a lot of people say, is like, oh, when it's fun. There is I recommend a book. I actually don't have it, called The Theory of Fun by Ralph Koster, that I highly, highly recommend that designers run. It's very easy to read. It's 2 pages. One is cartoon and one is text. It's called The Theory of Fun by Ralph. It looks like Ralph without an L. Koster, Koster. And the main thing that I teach the kids in class is fun for whom, because people have different ideas of what fun is. What fun is for someone is not fun for someone else. And so, like, when you get them in feedback and you have them play the game, they go, I didn't like this game. This game was horrible. Well, do you like platform games? No, I hate platform games. So is that really like good feedback for you? So when you're designing for something, you really got to think of who's it fun for. And Vilas said that we're gamers that wanted a hardcore gamer platform kind of person that's quick actiony sort of thing. So there wasn't a lot of content, there wasn't a lot of story and narrative. That was the audience it was designing for. When you're making a game, you should keep that in mind. And there's no right or wrong, like, oh, these are bad people because they don't like this game. It's just, some of the people like apples more than oranges. So that's an important thing, is fun for whom. You really got to kind of think about what is fun. Changes during development. And what's so funny about that is like Greenlight, Vilas was talking about, like, Greenlight stopped in the middle of the development process because this takes many years. I had the exact same problem. So I'm designing a supplement for the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game. It's in H.P. Lovecraft world, so it's a horror game. And I'm doing a supplement for it involving psychedelic drugs in the Cthulhu mythos. And this has taken so long that they changed their system. So the tabletop role-playing game completely revamped their play system, their mechanics. They went to 7th edition. So the 7th edition came out in the middle of me still working on this, taking forever on this. So I had to go back and redesign all the mechanics to fit their new system. So this happens, and you have to be really kind of aware of it as much as you can, because there's been problems with games, especially Dungeons and Dragons and the D20, where people were making they're making supplements, adventures, and supplements for the Dungeon Dragon system for what basically they were going to kill the system when, like, 4th came out. So being aware of the mechanic system that you're in your platforms and your consoles. So are you designing something for, PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 5, or VR? Where are you coming in? Unfortunately, you have to kind of be aware, especially if you're an indie, of being able to flex like that when the major fish, the big fish that you're riding, changes its course. You have to go with them and not have, like, a game for a dead system, essentially. So that's really good. The other part, and sorry that this is going on for a while, is mechanics to visuals or visuals to mechanics. So Vilas mentioned, like, you started with mechanic and then went to the visuals, and the visuals are the fluff, are the content, okay? And all I suggest to game designers is that those two things synchronize and match as closely as possible. That your content, your story world, your artwork, your music, all those elements fit the mechanics, the crunchy elements. The closer that those are in sync, usually, or to me at least, the better the game is. So you could tell what was the main mechanic the Vilas went with: rocket jumping. So you're jumping not with a jump function, but like a rocket function. Okay, rocket is sci-fi. So you're already going along a sci-fi element. So you have a little robot character. You could have gone, theoretically, a magic spell. Maybe you have a magic blast spell, and it's a fantasy world with, like, clouds. So it's like different atmospheres and different planets. There's clouds and there's mountains and, rain and lightning and whatever. So you could have completely gone that element, but it still needs to fit that core element of little, like a rocket explosion that is pushing you using physics. So as much as possible, it could either start with content, saying like, oh, I want to make a fantasy game, and then find the mechanic, or the mechanic, it doesn't matter, but try to get those things to be as close as possible. And obviously Tinertia totally does, and I think it works really well with a sci-fi element. You guys can test the parts. What Vilas was doing, you don't have to test the whole game, obviously. Test just a section of it to see what works. And then he was talking about, is harder better? Like, are you making a level really hard? Does that make it better? You want to get, and Jane McGonigal talks about this, you want to get the difficulty level where it's in education, it's called the zone of proximal development, or ZPD. You want to challenge the kids, but not too hard. You want to get this zone where they can do it with help. That's essentially what it is. That they can't do it by themselves, but with a little hint or a little help, they can do it. And in video games, what it is that you have the chance to redo it. Jane McGonigal did a test where so big joy happens when you fail in a game, like you die, but you know why you died and you could do it again. You respawn and you can do it again. So you could have a difficult level theoretically, but if you can save the game at a certain position, or you respawn like exactly where you were and you get a chance to do it again, that makes the level maybe not quite as hard. You know that you can rechange it. So if you were dying on a hard level and you get sent way back to the other level, then that's too frustrating, and players are going to give it like, oh, now I have to go through this stuff I already know how to do to get to the hard thing, and that's a give up. But if it's like, here's a hard thing and I failed and I'm right back exactly where I am and I could do it again, it's not quite as hard, and you can redo that. So you're looking for replayability is really good. Player empowerment, level decision and agency is really big on games. When you guys think about games, to empower your games, and this has to get in with Vilas talking about early access and stuff, that players like being involved in interactivity and they have agency to do stuff. So something to consider, I don't know if you're doing this, Vilas, is mod, being able to make your own levels. Can players make their own levels and stuff like that? Because that's huge, right? So you play your game and you solve it, and then you go, now I want to make my own level, and you Minecraft it. And that's a really big thing too, is you give a little bit of control and power to the players. In role-playing games and stuff, it's way different, because we have a live human being that's dealing with stuff. So that I like that on role-playing games, because if a player is like needs help or they're advanced, I as the game master can as soon as I think my thought, I can adjust to it. Whereas programmers have to now program it and take all this time to think, here's an advanced player, how are we going to challenge them? Here's a slower player, here's how we're going to have to program all these elements in to go with that. So that's something to consider. To me, it's a bonus for live analog games, because you have a live human being that can immediately react to a condition.
I think every game developer wishes they had a live consciousness in their game that could like adjust stuff.
Yeah. Oh, you're having problems. I'll change you here. So yeah. A couple more notes, and then I'm done. So and thank you for being patient. Giving feedback, getting and giving feedback. There's a whole art to that. That can be a whole talk and self as give. And I've heard this before from a data analyst who explained how to give and get feedback using games, and their job is scientific data analyst. There is an art to that, to getting feedback and being able to interpret it, knowing how to ask it and how to receive it and how to implement it. That's really, honestly, probably, if you want to go for it, you could do a whole talk just on that. Let's see, besides mechanic, brand the game, you got that. Okay, a couple more notes. Early access is good, because what Vilas said is you get a community that's really helpful. So you have the community, because it's such a competitive market. Video games, it's super competitive. Role-playing games, even at that point. But you want to get your fans, you want to get your fan base therein, and a lot of times they're involved if they get a little empowerment that they can talk to the developers. So I recommend transparency, what we call transparency, and Vilas talked about this, is that why would you do this early access? Well, you want to be honest with the people trying it and say, look, we're having trouble with this, or this isn't really good, this 8th world isn't good, so we're going to cut it. And that transparency, that honesty and being open with the developer, your play testers and your access testers or whatever, that oftentimes makes them bigger fans, and they're going to be bigger and better ambassadors to your game, because they had a part in it, they have a stake in it, and they're like, oh yeah, because this level is easier now. It was really hard, but then I tried it and I gave them this feedback and they incorporated it. Now they're part of you. They're almost part of the team. and they appreciate that when you're actually listening to them and being honest instead of sneaky and you're hiding things and you don't admit problems and you gloss it over. A lot of times they'll feel like you're lying to them or cheating them, and somehow, and they don't like that. So even the bad stuff in transparency, you want to keep that and say, look, we're really behind. We had these problems. A lot of people will be far more forgiving if you're talking to them than if you just don't say anything and something's wrong. But a lot of stuff, everything Vilas was showing completely applies to kind of any game you do. So I just want to kind of elevate it up to at least what I teach in the class on an overall level of games. And this was just a great example. And the game looks great.
Thanks.
Thanks, Vilas. So yes, my cat's coming out of the vet. So I wanted to get her.
What type of cat do you have?
Mutt cat. She's called a Torby. She's like a 3-color cat. She had her dental work, so
That's cool.
so anyway, Allison, if you want to show the game, I give a quick little feedback on you, and then I'll run and you guys could talk about the VR and stuff. So thank you very much for having me.
Come back with your cat if you're still get back before 10 p.m.
Cat. Oh. Yeah. This is really like small though, guys. I'm serious. Like no joke. You're gonna be unfascinated. Let's see here. I guess my entire screen share. Oh, screen 2. Yeah. That way I don't have to move stuff around. Part of the reason why you're not presenting your screen. Okay. So do you see?
I'm seeing your screen.
Okay. So part of the reason, just to make a quick excuse, for some reason, I made a pixel art. I'm not artistic.
Does that look like your mutt cat, Aaron?
Doesn't. She's a 3-color, but it is a cat. So yeah, that's great.
So I wanted to make my own art. I know there's open art, stuff available, but for some reason I had an instinct to pull out something that was in my brain, even though I had no idea what to do. Those are enemies, pretty generic. I called them fireflies. Other people called them candies. These are animation like strips, by the way, in case, I don't know, somebody didn't know. This is like a little magic disc I made that the cat can shoot. And that was like some other miscellaneous Krita or Inkscape random thing I did to make like a game title scene. I used Tiled to make the tile map, so this is kind of how that turned out. Those are houses. I don't know.
Nice.
That was one of the.
This is all great.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So that was it, and then the main idea was to attach it, like I was saying before, to a Ruby on Rails backend, and then the JavaScript was the primary front end. So this particular interface isn't very fancy yet. I do want to go back and add some more stuff, but right now my cat is logged in, so we'll just go with that. So this is a basic. I don't know. Is this okay? Is this size okay? This is as big as it can get. So the cat's over here. I don't know if you see it moving around.
Yep.
And then so you can hit the space bar. Oh no, what happened to something? Oh no, you know what I did? I accidentally removed the file for my, that image that you saw. So it's not showing up right now. I did it when I was pulling out the files for the images. So that's supposed to be the disk, so oh well. So the idea is you run around, there's at least a little bit of camera, the map's not very big. You can keep track of your points at the top there, which for now just represent.
Allison? Sorry, yeah? What's the goal? What are you trying to do? You're trying to catch those fireflies?
Yeah, you're supposed to catch these. Yeah, sorry. You're supposed to catch these fireflies, and you're supposed to shoot these green things with magic. Which I must have my disc. But you saw the image of the disc, so I guess you can.
Yeah. So you fired like the squares.
Yeah,
I mean, you fired something in them, and you want to eat the fireflies, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, can you move anywhere around in the screen, or are some of those things blocking you?
Some of the things block. Yeah.
Okay. And is there an end goal for this, or is it just get as many as you can and levels get harder?
For right now, it's just the what did I do? I'm sorry. But right now, sorry, I have trouble multitasking.
Yeah, that's totally fine.
The game is just to clear the screen. I did want to go back in and maybe do more like role playing, less, lessons at the enemies, things like that. Maybe have like another map that I would visit by, I don't know, perhaps entering in one of these houses. I may not even keep this layout the way it is either. It's just what I did for right now.
All this is good. I'm getting the basics. Now, can the squares kill you if they touch you? Will you die?
Not yet.
Okay, but was that the idea? Was that the idea?
Eventually, I was going to do that. Yeah.
Okay.
That way, it's not so easy.
So I think this is, this is great. This is a great basic game. All the stuff that you can alter, like I won't comment on, like, so the map, what they look like, what the idea is, all that sort of thing works. You might, just as an idea, just to consider is like, again, limiting the where you can go. So like the cat can only go certain ways will help.
Oh, we can at least, like, the trees, you can't go through the trees.
Right. So just
stuff like that.
Limit it, and you can also, what would be really interesting, the other thing that I think to do to be an interesting mechanic is that the number of fireflies you collect are somehow related to the magic that you project.
Okay.
Meaning, just as an idea to consider it, and you could paper prototype it, right? So you eat, like, you need to eat 3 fireflies to get 1 fireball.
Okay.
To shoot the bad guy. So you have to eat the bad guy or eat the fireflies and then shoot them. And all of a sudden, with that simple mechanic, that little twist, you have what I call a throttle. And it's a throttle to increase the difficulty or decrease the difficulty very easily. So you can make a level easier by having more fireflies or fewer enemies. Or you can make it harder by fewer fireflies and more enemies. And you can also adjust the speed of the enemies, their pattern that they're moving, what's their, how much are they attracted to you? Do they gang up on you? You can also adjust the difficulty by limiting the cat, by where the cat can move, things like that. But something to consider is just attaching the firefly that you're getting. So it's not just, you have fireflies collected, but that doesn't to me, that doesn't go to anything except a number, right?
Yeah.
So attach that. So the goal, look at what your goal is to clear the screen, and then everything else becomes mechanics on doing that. So now, if you're just collecting the fireflies, cool. But is it collect all the fireflies, but like before the enemies get you? And it might be interesting if you think like you're shooting the fireflies out, so it becomes a resource management game. Like maybe you need like X number of fireflies to get through a gate portal or something. So it becomes resource management in how many fireflies am I going to shoot and how many am I going to keep to get to the next level or something like that as the fireflies come in.
Cool.
But I think this is great. This is a total cute cat game. You could do a ton of stuff with the artwork and everything. And I'm actually thinking I would love to do a cat video game that's in Dream too, because there's like Lovecraft and cats in dreams are like a whole thing. But this looks great. I mean, as a prototype, again, just think of the 5 elements, right? So you're manipulating your fluffy, in this case, really fluffy component, which is your cat. To within the rules, within the boundaries, to achieve a goal, and think about what the goal is. And in game design, you could play a lot with a goal. And my example is just to think about goal. You could change a goal, and it completely can change the game. So think tic-tac-toe. The goal of tic-tac-toe is to get 3 of your X's or O's in a row, right? That's the goal. How do you win the game? You get 3 X's or O's in a row. Change that to change the goal so you force the other player to get X's 3 in a row. So you lose if you get 3 X's or 3 O's in a row. And try playing tic-tac-toe, reversing it that way so that you want to force the other player to get 3 in a row. It completely changes the game. So that's something that like, what is the goal of the game, and think of what changing that goal, how that you keep everything the same, keep the fireflies, keep the things, and you shoot the fireball, keep all that same. But what is the goal? Is it clear or is it, I don't know, maybe like the fireflies fill it. Maybe the goal is to fill it with fireflies, like, and you can attract them some way. You have to like shoot the bad guys because maybe they eat fireflies as well, and you don't want them to eat the fireflies. Something, I don't know. You know, that's up to you. But think of like how you could just change the goal can completely make a thing to the game. But yeah, I think it's cool.
Thank you.
Great start.
Nice
Cool.
feedback.
So I'm gonna get my cat. You guys have fun. If you're still here when I come back, I'll sign back in.
All right, great. Thanks a lot, Aaron. Really appreciate
Thanks,
you
Bobby.
joining.
Thanks, Vilas. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, great.
Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cool. So thanks. That's really sounds like a fun project, and it's going to be a great game when you're done with it, Allison.
Yeah.
And every month you can show updates if you like the same game or change up what you're going to show.
All right. Cool.
So let's hand it back to Vilas and Paul. Do you want to unmute yourself, or can you show your video, your cam, Paul?
Sure.
All right, cool. So Vilas, if you can take over the screen again, if you have anything else to present for, we'll go into the PSVR now, and then Paul's going to interview you.
Yeah, we can basically take
And
questions.
maybe actually, we're also wanted to talk about PS5 as well. If you can talk about all the updates.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about. So I don't have a dev kit, so I can't talk any working with PS5, but I can definitely talk about my impression of what they're doing based on the specs that they've put out. Yeah,
and then maybe if you can talk about now. We talked about how a lot of your design decisions for Tinertia wasn't from 2013. Like, how is in 2020? How is your development scene now, or how are you doing? If you had to do the same thing over again, what would you do now?
Yeah. So I guess I'll start with that. So I would say when we started Tinertia, streaming was still it was sort of taking off in terms of Twitch streaming and people watching streamers as like a primary source of entertainment. And so when we started, we weren't paying attention all that much to streamers. Twitch and Ustream and a couple of other platforms are starting to take hold, but it wasn't considered mainstream. I would say like maybe somewhere in the middle of development, 2014, 2015, we started to get really aware of like, oh wow, these streamers, like they're playing a lot of games first of all, and they're reaching large audiences. And I think there is an art to making games that work well with streaming. And there are certain games that don't work well with streaming. So games that work well with streaming are games that either have a lot of depth and they do have a lot of replay value, replayability. However, it has to be replayability that's not super repetitive. It should allow a lot of variation in replay. And that makes it interesting for certain streamers to then, sink a whole bunch of time into playing that game. And then I think you also have to think about playtime. Like, how much time can someone really spend in your game and still be entertained, and people watching this person can have fun watching it.
So how do you design, if you design Tinertia today to appeal to streamers, like what would you be doing?
I would go down the Mario Maker route. I would make it more about user-generated levels, because that Mario Maker is an amazing example of how you build a game that has incredible life with streamers. Now, it's not all streamers because it is still a high-skill game, and so you have to have a streamer who's like really into the how do I make a tough level that only I can beat or like my friends can't beat. However, the way that you share the levels, the way that you're able to quickly construct the levels, that is very much designed for streamers and content creators to just like go nuts with it and share it and keep playing the same levels over and over and challenge their friends. So so I would change perhaps the way we would have approached the design, knowing what I know now and knowing how prominent streaming is.
Cool. And then what about the technology decisions? Like, would you go with Unity still, and how would you have designed it with your contractors and art and all that stuff?
Yeah, I think I know this is the Unity group, but
No, we also host the Unreal group as well. And
okay, yeah. So I would recommend going to Unreal.
Why is that?
I've done so for my own projects or our own projects. Our next game is an Unreal project, and the main reason is it's not necessarily capability. I think Unreal, what they're offering is a more battle tested engine. It's an engine that has gone through a lot of AAA launch cycles, and so because of that, a lot of the systems that you're using are very robust and very reliable. Now, that does come with the caveat of it's a much more complex engine. So you're going to have to spend some time learning the engine. And if you're, let's say you're more comfortable with C# as opposed to C++, then, you're probably going to have a harder time, or you could try to do it all in blueprints, although I won't recommend that. So it's a trade-off. Like, I think for us, since we're experienced developers, we have no issue with like C++ programming and all that. We're happy to go to Unreal, and then you do get extra capability in terms of rendering power and just like graphics and physics, and so it's a very robust engine, and the price is obviously unbeatable. And yeah, I think even their model is very good. Like
Sure.
You're not,
Why did you say don't use blueprints, or are you not recommending blueprints?
I'm coming from a programmer background, so I don't recommend building a game in blueprints. I think blueprints are awesome for designers. In fact, I wish we had something like Blueprint in Unity when we were building Tinertia, because we used Playmaker instead. And Playmaker is very good. However,
was the Playmaker? What was that, just for the prototype stage? Did you launch with Playmaker?
We actually launched the PC version with Playmaker, the Steam version. However, when we went to console, we realized that we were having issues, and you get into this problem of like Playmaker updates at a certain interval. They do updates every couple of months, and then Unity is doing updates every couple of months, and they don't line up. And then Unity PS4 is like updating its own branch, and none of those things are synced, and so it's incredibly hard to like put that all together into a solid build that will pass console QA. It's kind of like a nightmare in a way.
Right. And why did you start with Playmaker at all?
It's very good. Playmaker is very good. Yeah, it's a great way for your designers to prototype ideas quickly without having to write code, because you can do these like FSMs, and it's all in editor. So in a way, it's sort of like Blueprints, although Blueprints is far more robust. It's a fully fledged like programming language. So I wish we had Blueprints in Unity, but Playmaker was really good until we got to console. Blueprints, I do recommend using Blueprints. I don't recommend building an entire game in Blueprints, but that's only if you're building a game that you're going to launch on Steam and console. If you're just building a game, like as a hobbyist, if you're just testing ideas, do the whole thing in Blueprints. Like, don't do C++. Don't even bother. Like, it's gonna be way faster in Blueprints. If you're trying to create something that's production ready and it's gonna pass QA, and you're gonna have to test, like, do 1,000 tests on it, code is way more. It's way more reliable. It's way easier to debug.
Right. And then, so in 2013, only Playmaker was available from Unity, but now there's competitors to Playmaker on Unity, and from Unity itself. Like, what would you recommend people if they're starting a new game today using from a designer point of view on Unity? Which
yeah, I know Unity's planning to add some kind of node-based scripting stuff. I haven't looked into it, so I don't know what I'd recommend. I would recommend Playmaker, honestly, because even when we were using it back then, and I've used it after too, it's very good. It's just that, it's just console is just like a whole nother level of tying things down and making sure it's like rock solid, and you kind of need full control for that. And so one of the other nice things about Unreal is you have the source code of the engine. So if there's an engine level bug, I can fix it and launch my game. I don't have to wait for Unreal to put out an update. And that's something you can't do with Unity unless you have the source license, which is probably too expensive for most indies to do.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. So, can you talk about PSVR and PS5? And Paul, you can unmute yourself as well, and you can take over the meetup right now.
Yeah.
Sure. Vilas, I have not had the chance to really see your product, but I can see that you're very knowledgeable in development for Unreal. What would you say, first of all, what is your impressions of the PS5 and PSVR in general for development as an indie developer?
So Paul, so Vilas is actually the game he's been presenting today. He also launched as a PSVR game as well. So maybe
sorry.
Vilas, you could talk about that before we start then.
Yeah, it's not, sorry, it's not PSVR. It's launched for VR, so Vive, Oculus, so you can do Steam VR.
Okay.
Tinertia is not a PSVR title.
Okay.
Actually, we did try to get it on PSVR, but the optimization was a huge challenge for PSVR on the base PS4. So we decided.
And why was that in terms of the frame rate, or what was difficult for you?
Yeah, so the challenge with PS4, PSVR is you are so the PS4 has a CPU that's not as powerful as your average PC. Your average desktop has a way more powerful CPU. Now, when you're doing VR, some of those resources are dedicated to actually getting the head tracking to work and just running the VR setup with the console, which means that essentially when you're doing VR, you have an even more underpowered console to develop on, and you're trying to render 2 eyes now, and you have to do it at 60 frames per second at least. So the optimization challenge is just, it goes from like here to up here. So my impression when we were trying to develop a version of Tinertia for PSVR. We were just testing to see like how much work is it going to be, and it ended up, we were like, man, we're going to have to like just redesign whole chunks of the game to even make this work. So for PS4, you basically had to design your VR game from the ground up for PSVR. That was the only way to get it optimal. It was very hard.
So you guys launched for Steam store and what other store?
Yeah, so we did Steam VR, and PlayStation 4. Those are the only 3 stores that we focused on. Oh, I think we lost Paul.
All right. That's fine. So basically, when you did these, so what was the process of taking your game from regular Steam to creating a Steam VR version? I know you are in Unity3D. You said you had originally created it as a 2.5D game. So what was the additional work you had to do?
So in our case, we were lucky because all our environments were 3D. Because we had built it in 3D. So in a way, our game lent itself really well to VR in that we didn't have to like build more level for you to look around and not see like, the edges of the world. So that worked really well. The part that was a challenge was the camera movement. So our game had a lot of movement and very fast movement. And so we had to design a camera system that could allow you to follow the action without making you sick. And this was an interesting process. As we went through it, we realized, because this was kind of my first big VR title that we were working on.
So were you doing a first person, or what was actual?
No, first person in Tinertia would basically kill you. Yeah. You would just, you're moving so fast that.
So are you the camera then in the VR version?
Yeah,
is there where the camera is?
A third person view, yeah. And I can show you a little video of someone playing, but yeah, you're kind of a third person following the character. And we had to design this camera in a way that it doesn't fall, so you don't get that motion sick falling feeling. And we had to design it to sort of smooth out certain movements so that you feel very comfortable.
That's cool. Can you show the video? That'd be great to see.
Yeah.
Did you do like a mixed reality green screen type thing, or?
No, we didn't play with any kind of mixed reality stuff. But
yeah, and when you said the camera tracking, I thought you were going to talk about the camera for the PS4 because it's supposed to be a very low powered thing, so it wasn't tracking properly. But you were talking about the camera in the actual VR, which is also an issue.
No, it's not that it wasn't tracking properly. It's just that the PS4 has to use some of its resources to let you play in VR, and so your game has less resources to run. So it's a much harder optimization problem, and you're trying to optimize it for VR, which means you have to render 2 images, one for each eye.
Yeah.
So
Paul's back. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry about that, guys. Some technical difficulties. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah.
So this game looks totally different. Actually, it seems like a totally different game now.
The mechanics are very much the same, but yeah, what's cool is you can actually see the rest of the world that you're platforming on. And you see we did the axis switch there, so we had to vignette just to not make you sick.
But even just watching on YouTube right now, or whatever the video is, it seems like a much more immersive game than the other videos you showed.
It definitely is very immersive, yeah, and especially when you get to like a boss battle. So let's do this. So here he's about to get into a boss battle.
So is it kind of like on rails where the person can move their head but only look around, or can they actually control the translation in any way? Or
no, they don't control the translation. So we move the camera for them.
Okay.
But they can look around, they can look ahead to see what the rest of the level is. So that's something that traditionally you can't do in a platformer. You can't look ahead to see what's coming up. Whereas in this setup, you can. And we have some vertical boss battles where you can really look around and see what's coming up behind you. So here you can see he's looking around. But
so is the game easier now because in VR because you can see more? Or?
Yeah, I do think it's slightly easier.
Almost like God view type thing.
Yeah, because you really have the freedom to look around. Let's see if we can jump.
Yeah, I've seen some examples of like mods with Super Mario Bros. Where they have this like VR perspective, like you said, Praveen God mode, and I do think like it works pretty well for platformers. It gives a more depth of field for the user. And what was this developed on, Vilas? On Unreal or Unity?
This is Unity.
Cool.
Yeah, this is Unity version 5.4.
And it's available for all the Steam VR platforms like HTC and...
Yeah, on Steam, it should work with pretty much any device that you can throw at it, as long as it's Steam VR compatible. So Windows Mixed Reality, Oculus, whatever headset you have. On the PS4, we decided not to go with VR just because it would have taken like another probably 2 years for us to optimize it for PSVR. So we decided just to do the regular PS version and optimize that.
Well, maybe for the PS5, I mean, I don't know, but there's rumors that the PSVR is going to work with the PS5. So I don't know, maybe those technical hurdles, with the faster processing power of the PS5, it would help out.
Definitely, yeah. So if you're trying to build a game for PSVR and PS5, it will be a much easier time to optimize because it's going to be a much more powerful console. The graphics card is more powerful. So yeah, definitely. Like it could be something that we could do if we tried it out now.
But it's like the arms race is, like Tim Sweeney at the Unreal demos, right? Everyone's blown away by the Unreal demos for PS5, but then he starts complaining about, how even then it's, the PS5 is still not as powerful as if you had made the same thing on a PC. It's almost like, every era is the same thing.
Yeah, he's right, except maybe on the SSD.
Okay.
The SSD tech that Sony has built is actually pretty impressive, and it's clever. Yeah, I think it will give developers some options that you won't have on PC. However, yeah, PC can quickly catch up. You know, in like a year or two, PC could catch up to what they've done. So yeah, it is a race, or arms race rather. They will escalate.
Cool.
What about Oculus Quest? Are you guys available for the Quest as well?
It's not on the Oculus Store. However, you can play with an Oculus on the Steam version. So if you have an Oculus, wait, is the Quest the embedded one? Or is that the? No, I guess that's the
like
Go.
the standalone Oculus headset, the $400 one. It's like the no cables one, the standalone.
Okay, yeah. So that doesn't connect to your PC, no. So that it won't work on that. Yeah.
So the Oculus Go is the one that's 3 degrees of freedom, and the Oculus Quest is 6 degrees, but they're both standalone.
Okay, yeah.
Oculus Go is going to be deprecated though, like later this year. So no one's really developing for it anymore.
Yeah, that's tricky. So those devices, you know, they're essentially like a fancy Android phone that's built into your headset. And optimizing for like a phone type device can be tough, especially because we focused on graphics, you know, because we were going for a PC console. So we wanted like large worlds, lots of physics. That can be hard to optimize on a mobile type device.
Cool. And then what was the reception you received? Because if you launched this in 2017, I believe, the VR version, like, was it, I mean, that was still the height of a lot of VR hype or VR interest. Like, did you get a lot of people who otherwise wouldn't have been interested in Tinertia all of a sudden, like, trying to figure out what you're doing, who you are?
Yeah, we got, I wouldn't say it was like a huge reception, but we got a very positive reception. So our VR reviews are just like, they're very glowing reviews of people really liking the game. And, you know, a lot of the things they're saying were like, oh, you know, this is like a meaty game. You can spend a bunch of hours in it. Whereas I think a lot of VR games they don't have much depth to them. You know, they're built as like small experiences. However, the VR response we got is not as big as like just the regular PC console. But I think it was worth doing the VR because yeah, we definitely got a new audience that came to it.
Cool. So we have a new person just came in, Scarlett, whatever you want to. She's part of Paul's group as well, the XR Miami.
Hi everybody, how you doing? I'm here as well. I represent women in tech and do my I focus more on the volumetric and lighter sector of XR. Yeah, it's good to hear everybody here as well.
Nice to meet you.
Cool, Paul. Do you have any other questions?
I honestly, I think I'm good. I actually have a situation. My car got possibly stolen, so I'm gonna have to jump off.
Wow.
But yeah.
All right, man. Hope it all
Miami
works
life
out
or
for you.
whatever.
Yeah, okay.
I hope so too. But great game, man. I love how PC developers they enable VR mode. I think that's always gonna, like you said, brings you new audience, and I wish you luck. And thank you for inviting me. And everyone have a good one.
Yeah, man. Good luck with your car.
Good luck with the car. Yeah.
That's cool. So
I got a question.
Sure.
How would you this is more a general question because I like to follow up. Just because we want to bring more women in these sectors, what advice would you give in terms of women and get into these development?
Yeah, so I guess in game development, what I've seen is usually, so it depends on department. Like what I've seen in a large studio is usually in the producer roles, it's like almost all women, and there's only like a few men producers. In artists, it's like a 50-50 split, like women to men. Programmers is highly skewed towards male. Musicians is maybe like 60 male, 40 female. So it depends on like what avenue you're going into. if you're trying to get more women into programming, you know, I would say like it's probably best to start start young, like get young girls interested in coding and programming, and like that to me is like the best approach, because if you're interested in this stuff early, then you're going to like stick it out and persevere and like, you know, go down that path as a career. I don't think it's easy to do that later on, you know, if once you're older, like because it's a lot of time you have to spend like programming or doing whatever. Like you have to really want to do this for a long time. But yeah, that would be my advice. And yeah, I don't know. I guess producing, it's like it's all women. So.
Well, that's really interesting. How production is many women and very few men, and developers are many men and very few women. So
the programmers, yeah. So designers, I would say, is again, it can be kind of split. But yeah, programming, I would say, skews very male. Music, like composers, it skews male, but it's more even. It's like 60-40, like I said. And then artists, I think, have always been kind of 50-50. You'll see, like, if you go to an art school or something, you know, like 3D artists, there's lots of women, lots of men.
In that case, what would you do in your company to help promote more diversity?
We're very small. We're 3 people, so.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think in our setup, yeah, I don't know. I don't really consider it, you know, because we're so small. But you know, our team is fairly diverse, so
yeah,
I kind of just hire whoever's available. You know, because usually the AAA companies will like scoop up most people.
Yeah. So how do you decide who to hire?
I look at what they've done, what have they worked on. I try to determine if they're like super passionate about what they're doing, and yeah, I mean, really, it's like competence. You know, do they have a good, like, can they communicate well? You know, do we think they're going to be like a good team player? Those are like the 3 most important things.
Are you currently looking for interns? Because you know, a lot of these kids are coming out and they're looking to show off their experience and build their portfolio. I'm getting a lot of requests.
Yeah, we do take interns. We have done internships over the summer, maybe like, you know, 2-3 weeks. Yeah, we can do interns. Yeah, if you know anyone who's interested, you know, let me know what track they're trying to go down. So whether it's design or programming or.
Fantastic, thank you.
Cool. Actually, you should meet Allison. She presented earlier. She's on the call right now. She just graduated from the boot camp and she presented her game. And we actually had a game mentor on who actually teaches kids game design. He gave feedback to Allison's game just now.
That's me. Hello. I don't know if you can see me or hear me. But yeah, I don't know. What am I doing? I forgot what I was doing. I went through a boot camp, a coding boot camp, and part of one of my projects was a Ruby on Rails backend and had to be a JavaScript front end. I was telling them all of them this before, and so I made a small phaser game, a 2D tile map like overhead view game. Really simple, but yeah. So that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to either push myself and try to get into web development work, but at the same time, I'm constantly distracted and fascinated by video games and the possibility of making more of them. So I have a tendency to be a little, I procrastinate a little actually on even job searching a little bit, not too much, because, you know, gotta eat. But yeah, so, but I don't know, can be friends on LinkedIn or something, or I think I'm in, I don't know which one I'm in. I'm on a Slack channel for something about women in tech in Miami, but I don't know if that's yours or if that's a different one, but I don't know, yeah. But, yeah.
Fantastic. We want to show more diversity in new sectors to increase more awareness and get more diversity, especially in development. So I'm excited that you already representing Applause.
Cool, thank you.
growing and growing the economy as well. Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Okay. If I don't know, if I come up with any exciting projects or things to share, or I don't know, insight to share, a good blog, or I can always pass it along or let you know. I don't know. That's helpful. Since I'm just kind of getting into stuff myself, so I'm actually an older person getting into stuff. I'm 39.
So that's
I know I don't.
You're very young.
Yeah, 39. I'm really motivated to do stuff though, so I always have been. Maybe a little too much, maybe to a fault, but so.
There's no such thing as too motivated.
Yeah, no, I'm just kind of being funny. I've always kind of like, I don't know, the work and school thing. I always work in school, and I've always balanced all of it. So I've always been making myself do so much. So I don't know. I mean, it's good, but here and there, it's like, okay, take it down a notch. Gotta, relax sometimes. So.
Yeah. So speaking of school. Why don't you talk about like your schooling and then nowadays there's so much like Udemy and online courses. Like what would you recommend for education nowadays to get into this career?
Well, I liked. Oh, were you? Oh, sorry. Are you asking me? Or are you? Sorry.
You can answer too.
Oh, God, I'm sorry. I get like in these quiet stages, and then all of a sudden I talk and I don't stop. It's really nutty. But no, it's okay. Go ahead. Mine's not that exciting, so go ahead. I digress.
All right. Why don't we come back to you and then Vilas, what would you recommend? What was your education? And then what would you recommend now? People perhaps don't want to go back to college, but how would they educate themselves now?
Yeah, so I will say one thing about the game industry is they don't really care about degrees, or honestly, it doesn't matter what you've done. What you need to show is that you're competent at some skill that's useful for game development. So if you're a 3D artist or an animator, you need to show that this is something you like, and therefore you've done some cool work.
Let me know when you're
and you need to have a portfolio, obviously, of some work that you've done. And yeah, I mean, your degree doesn't really matter unless you're like the data analytics guy, or or maybe if it's a very large company and you want to be like a production product manager or something, there are some courses that you can do for that. But on the development side, yeah, I mean, I've seen kids who just come out of high school and they're like amazing programmers, and they're just doing that, like they have no degree. And then I've also seen like master's degree computer science people who are working on like very specific things, and so it really is about your competence, like how good are you at something, how knowledgeable are you, and what work have you done.
And then can you describe like the career path? Like, everyone always, at least in LA, everyone knows that like gaming is like, I think 15 times bigger industry than movies and music combined right now. So what's the career path in gaming if it's such a large industry?
So first identify what aspect of, when you say gaming, do you want to be an artist? Do you want to be a designer? Do you want to be a programmer? Do you want to make sound effects? Do you want to compose music? Do you want to be like the project manager person? So there's like all these different avenues. And I would recommend like choosing one of those. It's not easy you basically won't get hired as a generalist. You're going to get hired as like one of those things. So if you're artistically inclined, then I would say go for like 3D art or 2D art, as a concept artist, or try to become an animator, right? Start building your work. You can do courses to learn the software that are required. So for that, I would recommend maybe doing some coursework because it'll speed up the process than just like trying to learn yourself. The one thing that I like about the game industry is you'll meet people in like programming positions and all that, who are just coming from like all over the place. Like there's no standard, oh, you do this first and then you get this degree and now you're a game programmer. You'll meet like a lot of variety of different people who have come from different paths of life. In my case, I did computer science for my undergrad, and then I went to a 3D animation school for like a 9-month course where I just learned like Maya and some of the other software that are used in game development.
So which school did you go to for that?
So that was, it's called Center of Digital Imaging Arts in Boston. So I went there. That was like a 9-month course. And at the end of it, you have to do a little project, animation project. And then I got hired as a technical artist for a small game company. And a technical artist is basically someone who interfaces with the art team and the development team. So they help the art team structure their assets so that the development team, the programmers, can take those assets and build whatever functionality they need to build. So I was doing like Maya scripting, rigging, building tools for the artists. And then I transitioned into gameplay programming. So then I was starting to write like camera systems, character movement systems, character customization systems. And so, yeah, and then basically I'm now just like a gameplay programmer. That's like my primary job.
And how did you transition from being an employee to owning your own firm, first as a contractor, and then as a game studio itself?
So I worked at a bunch of companies for about six and a half years, and then I decided like, well, I'm building a lot of games, but these are not games that I would play. These are like they're like virtual worlds, or they're like it's not something I would buy. And so I was like, okay, I kind of want to make a game that I would actually like purchase on the PlayStation Store. And I had the experience to sort of know what's needed to build such a game, because I've been doing development for these years. And I had coworkers who I'd worked with in the past who also shared this goal, and we were like, okay, let's put a team together and try it. And initially we were self-funded for a short period. And then we were like, okay, we'll do contract, because we have to do contract, because otherwise you're not making money, while you're developing your own games. So we used our colleagues and whatever connections we had to get some contracts. So we do mostly programming contracts. It's all programming work. We don't really create assets or anything for other companies. It's just they need a programmer with very specific knowledge of like, they're trying to build a multiplayer game and they need someone to write some network code.
So why would someone do that? As far like, why would a game company need to create their own like multi-network code if it's already built into a lot of these engines?
Well, game companies don't use Unity or Unreal. So
Okay.
a lot of the AAA guys, they have their own engines or, however, that said, so even projects that we worked on that use Unity, the Unity multiplayer networking is really not usable. It's not something you can use for a large project. So that's why you would have us come in and like give you a solution and then help you integrate that solution with your game.
So why is that? With Unity's like a $6 billion company now, and Unreal Epic is 17 billion market cap. Cap.
Well,
like, how are they not able to do this?
Epic's multiplayer system is really good, which is why our next game is built in Unreal.
Okay.
So Epic, they're rolling in all their Fortnite optimizations and stuff into that, and it is very, very good. So for Unity, I think it's more a question of they had a system, they had integrated, what's it called? Fox something.
They had Photon for a while. People
Well,
used.
Photon is third party. Yeah, Photon is very popular. But the problem with Photon is if you're a studio building a game, you don't want to get locked into paying Photon for running your servers and all that. So it's not maybe the best option for a studio, a large studio. But yeah, Photon's popular, but they had their own system that was not very good. It wasn't that battle tested, and then they ripped that out, and now they're planning to do like another system.
And then have you looked at like other systems like Lumberyard or just in generic systems?
Lumberyard was interesting. I had looked at Crytek, just the engine,
Yeah.
before the company kind of.
Yeah, Crytek was big into VR for a while too. I know they came to VRLA. The founder showed that
Yeah.
wall, that mountain, that rock climbing thing. One of the
Yeah,
first
yeah.
people to do that. Yeah.
Crytek was an interesting engine, although it did seem like if you were going to build a game in Crytek, it was going to look like Far Cry. Like there's no way around that. It's like their whole shading pipeline is designed for that very specific forested, island look.
Yeah, it's like making a WordPress type thing.
Yeah.
A WordPress website. They all look like. That's cool. So, yeah, once Scarlett and Paul, if you're still on, or Rita, Allison, why don't you wrap up, ask your last few questions or demo, whatever you want to demo, and then Vilas, you can wrap up. Maybe talk about what you're working on next. I know you got some cool stuff in the pipeline, and then we'll call it a night.
All right.
Scarlett, do you want to just go into what you're working on, or talk about what you want to talk about? This is what we do every meetup. Is we do we have to do the introductions at the beginning, then we also wrap up at the end, going around round robin. What do you guys want to talk about?
Sure, I could say what I'm working on. So I'm also more towards building community, but one of the platforms we're working on is a web-based platform called Ozone Universe that does online conferences. At this moment, we're working on a Burning Man event to onboard people onto this platform, which is great because, as you know, not everybody has gear, so we want to make it and such that everybody can still experience XR using web-based, which is great, which is our own engine. And yeah, it's pretty interesting. I can't tell too much, but just because we're still developing.
So is it avatars that you're walking around in this environment, or is it 360 video, or?
No, this is a web-based, kind of like Hubs, but it's unlimited. Hubs is very so we can create as much avatars as we like because it's our own engine. So we can modify it. For instance, we have over 100 avatars at one point, and it's unlimited.
Well, you're the right person on the call. Vilas, his bio is he's an avatar. He's a character avatar expert.
Oh wow!
On his LinkedIn bio.
Yeah. So and we're always looking for talent. Again, this is a Burning Man event, and we're working with Burning Man because it lures a lot of creatives, and we want to really push the boundaries of technology. So yeah, we just had a talk and confirmed. As many might not know what Burning Man is. It's an event that happens annually over at the Black Rock Desert, Nevada. But this year it got canceled, so we're doing it virtually. So what that means is we're helping people to have a virtual experience. We did a small version, kind of like test it out, called Remote Burn, but that was more like web-based, kind of like Zoom and so forth. But this is actual XR, virtual reality, web-based. So what that means is that you get in and we are designing different type of theme parks, I would say themes, or that people could enter. We could have about 100 per hub, all simultaneously. So that's kind of what we're working on. Right now, we're just stress testing it to see how far we can go. It is native, so we can import Unity into this web base. So this is kind of like where we're exploring right now.
So it seems like Vilas, you can like talk about this, like with Burning Man, right? Half the fun or all the fun is dressing up, right? So that'd be cool. Your avatar having your not just your costume, but animated versions of your costume. You can do stuff that you couldn't do in real life.
Yeah, absolutely. we're creating like basically a digital twin of Burning Man. So that's what we're working on. So, but yeah, that's
It's not only that. We're kind of
Paul, you're too
recreating
close up.
also, if I may say, Scarlett, sorry to interrupt you, like the spirit
You're too close
of
up.
Burning
Sorry,
Man,
Paul.
you know? What?
You're too close up. There you go. Turn off your light. Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I was saying, that we're basically like, you know, it's not only creating a digital twin of Burning Man, it's also allowing the creativity of Burning Man to inhabit a WebXR space, you know? And by allowing it to be a WebXR experience, we're allowing any burner to, you know, join the party. Even if this year Burning Man isn't happening, we're still coming together and creating that unique experience. And it's once in a lifetime, you know, opportunity to really bring Burning Man to the world. And that's what we're trying to do here at Labs. And it's not only about the avatars, about, you know, carts, volumetric capture. It's about creating a new type of experience that you know, like, and we actually have this initiative called Ready Player One. So I think there's a lot of interesting things that can happen, you know, with the Burning Man world and the XR world, where it, you know, where it can allow us to create new realms. But I don't want to sound too poetic. So
But you know, there's two things that happen. Two things happened this week. You know, WDC, the Apple conference on Monday, you know, they announced one of the things was the volumetric capture of Miami there's like basically 6 cities around the world that Apple is released as volumetric maps, including Miami, Chicago, LA, 3 others. But that'd be interesting. You can just grab the maps immediately without having to scan Miami. They've already done it. The other thing is with Velocking, I think maybe we can ask him is, you know, the concept, you know, Scarlett mentioned digital twins of yourself, but I wonder if that's actually what you want, right? Because, you know, with the fun of D&D, you know, with Aaron as a big D&D guy, is just, you create something, but you create a version of yourself, a character that's, you know, basically aspirational, or what you would be like if you were a wizard. I wonder what Velas thinks about that, is like, but enough where you actually are emotionally vested in it, where you can play that same character over 20 years, the same D&D character type thing, and that will give it value as well.
Yeah, this is very open range, or it's just a base, and it's really up to the audience to come up with their arts. It's just to help on board, so they could create whatever they really want.
And Velas was asking earlier about the blockchain aspect. This could be the, you know, your character can exist on blockchain. It's a real thing. It's not just a made up character. It's something that's a tokenized character that Velas's version is something real. If you want to change it, you have to change it on blockchain, which makes it like that friction also gives it value.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
well, definitely. And I think there's like, sorry, what?
Yeah, so Velas, what do you think then about how would they go about creating a character system to make this Burning Man concept come alive beyond just like the typical, you know, alt space type characters or avatars?
That's a big question. I would have to maybe talk to some Burning Man types and figure out what they want to do with their characters.
Right.
I mean, me as a programmer, you know, I'm like very antisocial. I never go to Burning Man. So I have to talk to some people and see what they want.
Yeah, definitely, we were open, you know, to have your input. You know, this is really about pushing, you know, allowing people who have never been to Burning Man kind of like reinvent what they imagine Burning Man is. So not necessarily, you know, it's great if you've never been and want to create a character. But yeah, that's the whole point, you know, so anybody could import their own avatar. The digital twin I mentioned is because there's amazing art cards that we already have digital assets of that we want to import to this platform, to our engine that we're working on. So
yeah, so Velas, that's another thing is, you know, with when you're working with multiple artists, like costume designers, things like that, or even like tattoo artists, right? You know, each person can own their own IP, and they can cross-license it to, if someone wants this one tattoo on their avatar, then that tattoo artist can get paid, and showcase who has what on their avatar.
Yeah.
So you're talking about like they're doing this on this platform essentially that you're talking about for the Burning Man event.
I can ask Scarlett. Yeah, she's
Yeah.
the one building it.
Yeah. So basically, we're just setting up the foundation. We definitely want to open an opportunity to add into blockchain in a component. We're working directly with the blockchain center on this as well. So if that's something you want to take on, again, this is kind of very much experimental since nobody really have done anything like this before. And we're giving free range is diagnostic. So it's really what your imagination. We're just having that foundation with this engine.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're like right now you're in the early stages of like putting together the concept and figuring out like what you can do.
We already have the engine. We have the digital assets. They're, like I mentioned before, they're CAD drawings that already been imported to Unity that works in this engine that we have. And now the avatar themselves, we haven't done them because we're giving it free range to the artists.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And of course, one of the biggest questions people always ask if you're an artist and about putting it on the blockchain, like how does that work and so forth. So maybe that's something that we could set up a pipeline of how do you help support artists who are interested in creating those we're mainly helping people to onboard because again it's a web base, but we want to make it so anybody can do this.
Yeah, the blockchain stuff I would have to look into more. I mean, I've only seen blockchain usage for like, I guess, data storage of critical ordered data like ledgers or stuff, or obviously cryptocurrency. I haven't really looked at what you do with the blockchain in terms of assets.
Yeah, we had a big announcement today, actually. William Shatner, Captain Kirk, just signed with us with Wax. So yeah, a lot going on in that space to create his own digital trading cards.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, definitely the intersection of these platforms are merging much quicker.
Cool. Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting just to figure some of this out because part of it is licensing.
Yeah.
So you can just take the existing licenses you have for your artwork for games. You have so many artists working on your games. Just translate those licenses into smart contract code and go from there. So it's like you're not reinventing the wheel, stuff that artists already understand, a contract, but just make it into code format. So yeah, it starts somewhere. So
yeah, definitely want to. Again, it's in a way we are in the early stage only because we just got the confirmation like literally today that we're official. So
congratulations.
Yeah, that allows us to really be one of the main directors for this event. That's where we're at right now.
It's awesome.
Very cool.
I'm actually since this is a meetup, I really want to talk a little bit about the Apple's volumetric in Miami. That's something that interests me. So if you have any information, I'd love to.
Yeah. That's one of the things that we were supposed to do today is actually do a demo on that. So why don't you guys? I'll pull it up. So if Allison, Rita, Paul, why don't you do your wrap up remarks while I pull up that demo, and then we'll end with Vilas.
Okay, hi, this is Rita. And
so Rita, you didn't really introduce yourself. So this is your intro also as your wrap up.
Yeah, I know. Well, I just joined XR Labs very recently. I've been on the outskirts looking at technology from in different expos and different places. And I think a lot can be done with this, and I think it's not being done. And my background is in film, television, advertising, marketing from Bombay, Manhattan, Miami. So I still have my base in India as well as in Manhattan. So I belong to a couple of things, and I thought maybe if we can find talent that we can bring it together, and maybe have projects and what that I could tie together maybe. And the other thing is I'm trying to see what we have in this field in Miami, so I can help monetize. And probably I also do something else. I've been in the entrepreneurs world for the last 6 years in Miami, and also in Manhattan and Bombay. I'm trying to connect the dots. I'm trying to connect the talents, producers, finance, everything together. So I'm watching, and I'm trying to promote XR Labs and see how I can get mentors, probably to even groom the next generation. So I liked, Vilas, when you said you take internship, but because I do have people from London and from even Bombay and with film background, and those kids are actually new graduates from Brighton in gaming. And I think that would be excellent to connect the dots, So that's my thing. And I'm into I'm more a producer director kind of person, and I like scripting. So that's my background. And the other thing is, in November we have GEW. I don't know where Allison and Vilas are from. Are you from Florida or elsewhere?
Los Angeles.
Los Angeles. Okay, good. We have this, a GEW, which is a entrepreneurs networking thing. It's a week in November that the entire globe kind of gets together on a digital platform this year. So it'll be even much better to have certain panel discussions and all that. And I might pull on a few people depending on what topics we decide. And then maybe it'll be a little show and tell of like half an hour each, and a Q&A of 15 minutes. And that'll be it. And I think it's a great platform to get yourselves out there, because it's with the Kaufman Foundation actually promoting that. And I'm the community organizer in Florida, one of them. And but I'm also doing with the DC a lot of the stuff, behind the scenes. So it'll be great. It's really nice to connect everyone.
Yeah, Rita, thanks for coming on. So I'm going to share my screen right now. I'll show you. It's called Apple Geo Anchors as part of ARKit4. So Dan Miller, the main evangelist for AR VR XR for Unity, he's done 2 meetups for us. He did a demo already. He's got pre-access to it. So since we're a Unity user group, we can actually get pre-access as well, and get Dan to come to speak. So let me present right now. All right. So this is Dan Miller. We did a AI robotics event with him last year, where we trained a go-kart. But let me just show you what he did now with it's called Apple ARKit Geo Anchors. So this is his neighborhood. He lives in San Francisco, but it's also available in Miami. So basically, each dot is an anchor he previously laid, and those anchors actually stick around too over multiple sessions, and other people can see them as well.
Oh, I see. Okay. So the blue dots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's actually an SDK, but those blue dots don't have to be blue dots. They could be something else.
Sure.
It could
Yeah.
be like a Statue of Liberty or something in AR. But I think this is especially for something like the Burning Man type thing. You have people who you're creating a virtual environment. So if you have the virtual environment already mapped out, so in this case, this is a Miami mapped out. So you could create the virtual park or something in Miami, but in the VR, you don't have to remap it out, because this is the geo anchors, but there's a lot of other data. That's actually a whole LiDAR scans that we've done of Miami, and Apple actually acquired a company that did it, and they're open sourcing it. Or no, they're giving it away for free as part of the Apple Maps SDK now. So,
would you mind sending me that link? I'm looking at Apple website on ARKit. That's it.
yeah, just so if you search for, let me do it right now. Geo anchors is probably what we search for.
Geo anchor.
So here, watch for geo anchors near you. The AR strategy or emergence enterprise, but
Okay.
But I think the way it's going to work is like it'll be meetups like this that produce demos and videos, but we'll have first mover advantage and thought leadership now, because you see this, someone, all they did was just repost Dan's video. So I think there's not a lot of people doing it yet, and it will be a really easy way to get traction in anything. So basically, if you posted a simple geo anchors video, you'll be only the second person in the whole world apparently that has a video on Twitter doing this. So
so there you go.
And we'll get Dan to retweet it for us too.
This is interesting. Yeah, I'm looking for. I did find it on their website.
Yeah.
Yeah, might be cool for construction crews or something.
Yeah, it's all Apple with LiDAR.
Yeah, but since you're marrying the with the, everyone knows Burning Man, well except Vilas, everyone knows Burning Man.
I know
So,
Burning Man, but yeah.
but you know, like all these AR geeks who work at Google on ARKit and all the ARKit4, ARKit people who work at Apple, Google, they all know about Burning Man or attend Burning Man, or they always aspirationally wanted to. So I think like immediately, if you do something in Burning Man and AR, like everyone in the whole XR community will immediately support the project or contribute code or just want to watch your videos. It'll be a pretty easy way to get like potentially amazing amount of free exposure for the virtual Burning Man.
Yeah, definitely.
And such as you're in Miami, you might as well try it out because no one else. You have to be in one of these 6 cities for it to work.
Yeah, so lucky for us, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, again, this is meant to help the community to get exposure to do a Burning Man event. As you know, Burning Man is not a festival, is an experience, and there's no monetization. It's all about being open source and just showing off your creativity on this panel.
Yeah, so it looks like one of the people that's part of our group, Chris Matthew, he's one of the ex-blockchain people at Magic Leap before they get laid off. He posted there's an XR anchors version of this too on the same thread. But you can see here, you can see here like we posted to Dan, replied to Dan's tweet, and then other people are saying, yeah, lucky Miami, people want to move here now just to try this out. So
Honestly, like, you know, as a side conversation or whatever, I feel that a lot of people from Silicon Valley are starting to move here. And, you know, I think it's very interesting how Miami is becoming like such a desirable spot, you know, for people who want to, Silicon Valley folks who want to.
New idea. I'm calling decentralized XR anchors.
Sorry. This is Chris's video of XR version of this. He made a Heroku app, but I'll play this in a second.
Sure. No, that looks really cool.
Yeah. Well, let me play it now. This is Chris from ex Magic Leap executive. He got bought out twice by South Florida companies, but he never moved here. He's stuck around in Arizona. He got bought out by Citrix and then by Magic Leap twice. The Magic Leap one, he got bought up for his digital ledger technology IoT project, or they bought him out. But his daughter is actually trying to become a rock star. So maybe you can ask her to perform at your virtual conference.
Yeah.
Basically, hey, Chris Matthew here. I've been experimenting with this new.
Oh, sorry.
Hey, Chris Matthew here. I've been experimenting with this new idea I'm calling decentralized XR anchors. Basically, it's a combination of a few open source projects like ARJS, grabbing lat longs and doing some geohashing, and using GunDB to store these by, like, I think I've got it set to a half-mile radius via geohashes. So basically, this little icon at the bottom right of this app, you touch it, and it basically drops a real-time XR anchor right at your lat long where you're standing. So I've been kind of experimenting with this, like using it to find my car in parking lots, what have you. But you can imagine that these little anchors could be GLTFs. You could put an API that drops it into GunDB, say from at a particular geohash. Or these could be like triggers based on, like, if you're here, fire events or things that could happen. What's kind of cool about this is as you move around or walk around, the size of these anchors changes respectively. So the closer you get, the bigger they get. The further away, the smaller they get. So you can kind of imagine, the interesting things you could do. And being decentralized, there isn't like a company that owns the AR cloud. These are all could be something that we, as a movement, if you will, could write to as the beginning of AR cloud. So if you want to play with this, feel free to open up your web browser. It's a WebXR app, xranchors.com. So there you go. Kind of an interesting experiment.
That's cool. Kind of reminds me of one of our friends, it's Like App. He made a privacy centric social networking mobile app, and he did the virtual Y Combinator program, and then he's actually big into the Bollywood Indian movie industry too. Like, he does a lot of these licenses Bollywood film to show in U.S. theaters. So okay, that's the other part of my life. But yeah, but he's doing this. So I'm wondering. So basically, with this app is he sets the areas where, if you have like kids, right? You set an area where you get the parents get an alert if your kids wander into those areas, or you can set like an area with warnings, like telling people don't do this and that when you enter this area. So there are geofencing type applications for security, privacy. This might work for as well, which are more AR aspect rather than just all GPS-y. So actually, like, one of the things we built, like, if you guys remember the whole concept of friend finders, like buddy finders. So we actually built the world's first one for AT&T Wireless. We used to go out to Seattle a lot. So either brush off my old resume. Remember what we did for this stuff. Be cool to get back into this. Yeah, it's all coming together, man. It's all exciting times again. The middle of the lockdown, we're discovering new connections on Zoom calls.
Absolutely.
Is Miami still locked down?
Yeah, you're not under lockdown, Vilas?
Things have kind of returned to normal right here, at least in Burbank.
Okay.
So, so I mean, there's no lockdown here, so you're free to go anywhere. Restaurants have some restrictions, and theaters are not open. So theaters and gyms, I think, are the only thing that have restrictions right now.
Okay. So just the last. So Scarlett's gone, Rita's gone. Paul, do you want to say your last two bits, and then Allison, and then we'll wrap up with Vilas?
Sure. So yeah, no, I think that it's been a really interesting conversation. Here at XR Labs, we're polishing up the Miami chapter to work with all these amazing technologies that we've seen today, and we're working with Burning Man and a lot of other incredible partners to work on volumetric content, XR, AR, VR. And we're very happy to work in tangent with you, Praveen, and the video game community to create next level experiences. And I think the time is here, and we're very happy to be here. So let's continue on and rock on.
Cool. When you say a chapter, do you have other chapters besides Miami, or starting other chapters?
Miami is going to be our first chapter. Right now our next chapter is going to be New York City. But we say chapters because our intentions is to create more XR communities and link them up, through our different partners and ventures and projects.
Yeah, LA is ripe for that because there's no more XRLA out there anymore. They don't really meet anymore. There's no conferences and VRLA. I mean, VRLA hasn't been going on since 2018, but I'll be back in LA sometime in August. So
maybe you can start a chapter there.
Yeah, I'll bring some South Beach sand so we can do a little ceremony. Have a embassy in Miami out in LA to consecrate it.
That sounds great.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, we'll wrap up with Vilas. Yeah, thanks Vilas for being our speaker. It's been a great conversation. And yeah, so what are you working on in the future?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the invite. It's fun talking. Always fun to share like development stories or learnings or talk tech. So yeah, we're currently working on a Mars survival game. So it's like it's an immersive like first-person survival game. Kind of taking the premise very similar to the movie The Martian. So you're on Mars. You're part of a small team that's gone to colonize Mars, and you're basically fighting the elements, fighting the conditions on Mars essentially, and trying to survive. I don't have much to like share at the moment on this, but
I see the video. You want me to just play the video, or do you want to play it?
So that trailer is a very old version that we're going to take down pretty soon.
Okay.
But you can actually play through it. Yeah, you can play through it, and it'll give you a sense of like what the game is.
All right, let me share my screen then.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the project that we're. It's actually a project that we took over from another developer. But
Lacuna package, and then I'm gonna hit play now.
Yep, go for it. And yeah, this will again be PC console will be our target.
Wow.
It's pretty cool. So is this an Unreal game?
Yeah, we're developing in Unreal. So currently, if you go to, actually, you can go up, if you scroll up and underneath the video, there's a couple of updates. So you can click update 3. This just shows you like we're kind of like updating the community on some of the features we're working on. Oh, did that link not work?
Oh, let me share this tab instead. Because it opened a new tab, so we have to share the new tab.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so we're just doing like development updates, showing showing the community what some of the tech we're working on, some of the rover tech. Yeah, so it's still in development. There's a bunch of more work to do, but this will
Yeah,
be
actually, it seems pretty topical. Everyone's talking about SpaceX and living on Mars. And one of our friends, Deborah Sass, she's in what's that place in Spain? Ibiza.
Ibiza.
Yeah, she has a new reality TV show in development with SpaceX and NASA, officially in development with them to do a reality show where every year, or every launch or something, they're going to send a contestant out into space, like a $30 million the value they're calling it for a space ride, but they're giving it away as part of the reality TV show. So she's been in development for that show for a while now, but she goes to all these launches in Russia and Cape Canaveral. Pretty
That's
cool.
cool,
I'm
yeah.
sure she'd like to see this. But she's wanted to develop a lot of games in AR, VR, and AI and blockchain. I'm not sure how all those buzzwords come into play, but she uses them a lot in her planning, so it's kind of cool. Cool. Yeah. So when we're out in LA, I'll introduce you to her. She still goes out there a lot. She used to go to. I'm sure you know her from different places, but she's been out of the country for a little bit while. So awesome. Cool. Well, I'm gonna pass all the emails to you guys so you guys can keep in touch, or you can put them in the chat right now as well, and I'll send you guys the chat transcript as well. And then, as always, this video is available to all the participants. You can use it for your own marketing and re-edit it as you see fit. Cool. And then, does anyone have anything they want to share not on video? So we turn it off and let people network and stay if they want to. But I'm going to turn the video off in a second.
Yeah. Thanks. It was great, Praveen.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for hosting.
Yes, thank you.
All right, guys. We'll talk soon.
You have my email. Bye.
All right. Nice to meet everyone.
Yeah, same.
Thanks.
So yeah, why don't you guys just copy the email addresses now? So it might take a couple hours for the chat to be available.
So what's your email address? I know your email address.
It's fine. I mean, I'll just send it to everyone. That's fine too. You know, I'm gonna get the chat transcript. All right, great guys. I'm gonna end the meeting now. We'll talk soon. Right,
yeah. Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night. Hold on.